So fine. So again, welcoming all of you to this discussion of test 6. I will be sharing with all of you the answers, that is the model answers. All right. So in a short while, in fact, and let me tell you about the purpose of discussion along with this model answer. It is primarily in the context of letting you understand that in the model answer, we take this liberty of either increasing the word or word limit or decreasing the word limit and trying to give you a sort of an idea about the answer. And in the discussion, we try to provide you the structure that is very, very important as far as scoring good marks in GS is concerned. So, as I mean, of course, telling to all of you that there are two things on which your evaluation is largely done as far as GS is concerned. One is that obviously the content, the exact information, of course, which includes the factual informations as well. So exact information that is required to actually write an answer. And secondly, that is equally very important for actually, of course, I mean, attracting good marks from the examiner, and that is the structure of your answer. And when I say the structure of the answer, it simply means that whether you have understood about the demand of the question or not. And in the context of that only, have you been able to, of course, narrate your opinion or write your opinion or not? So therefore, structure also matters a lot as far as the scoring good marks is concerned. Suppose I give you an example. Suppose someone has written the answer, but probably the structure is not sound. All right, then still out of 10, he or she can score, let's say, 4, 4.5, or maybe at the max 5. But suppose if you have both the content, I mean, idea is that you have content and as well as the structure. Then if you're scoring where, let's say, only 4.5 or 5 in the structure, rather, if having a structure in the answer will fetch you a score of more than 6.5 and 7.5. So that is actually the advantage of having these two things in your answer. So what I was trying to explain to you was that the model answer, the key that we also provide you in the printed form, that is primarily only the content, not the structure exactly, I would say in this manner. The structure we discuss in the discussion only. Fine. So therefore, that's the importance of understanding the these two things. In fact, I mean, at one hand, we are providing you the printed answer. On the other hand, we are also asking you to attend the discussion sessions. What is the purpose of that? The purpose is actually to have the combination of both of these two things with you in your answer writing style. ठीक है, तो ये पर्पस है लार्जली. बाकी तो आंसर्स में आपको मिल ही जाता है कंटेंट और उसका कॉन्सेप्ट जो भी है. तो ये एडवांटेज है. आई मीन दिस इज द एडवांटेज ऑफ एक्चुअली अटेंडिंग द डिस्कशन इन फैक्ट. Now, having said that, let me now tell you few of my observations that I actually analyzed after going through some of your scripts. Some of you, I think, 2 or 3 scripts I have checked till now, and some of you have not submitted till now. So, out of those, I mean, script evaluation, I realized that many of you have the idea about the, I would say, the content of economy, barring a few areas where I found that there are certain conceptual limitations. All right. However, overall, the impression was sound. I understood that you have a fair idea about it. But what I found as missing out was the structure of your answer. So, in majority of your answers, structures were actually missing. So that's what actually is the importance of actually, of course, hearing me out, in fact, in this particular session of discussing the test paper 6. So today we are going to discuss test paper 6, and tomorrow we'll be having a discussion of test paper 7 also. All right. So since 7 includes the areas of science and technologies, internal security and economy as well. So I believe that 1 or 2 areas we will discuss tomorrow, and then afterwards, maybe on Monday again, towards the evening, again we'll be having a discussion. because there are three areas in fact in test number 7. So all the three areas can't be done at the same time. Otherwise, it will become very hodgepodge for all of you. So one area will take up tomorrow, and the rest area will take up on Monday. That's what actually we'll be having the discussion of test 7 tomorrow. Okay. Test 6 we will be discussing today, and few of the questions of test 6 where the inputs of technology was also involved, but those areas we'll discuss also tomorrow. That is an idea. Fine. So let us now start with the discussion. All right, so now I'm sharing with all of you the test paper that is with you now. If you can see, fine. So this was the test paper 6 that was based upon Indian economy, and now let me explain to you about the question number 1, and then we'll also discuss some overall analysis of how to tackle paper GS paper 3, especially the content of economy by all of you. Let us first of all discuss discuss all these questions one by one. Fine. So starting with the question number 1. Now see, this question is in the context of the nature of Indian economy. That actually becomes the very first chapter when you start, of course, entering into the Indian economy. So it is in the context of that India has emerged as the fastest growing major economy in the world and is expected to be one of the top 3 economic powers in the world over the next 10 to 15 years, backed by its robust democracy and strong partnership. Now, see, this is one of the opinions. I mean, idea is about any economy, whether it's Indian or American, there could be two divergent opinions. Fine. For example, let's say recently the IMF had predicted about the economic growth of China would be quite robust and would be growing further more speedily in comparison to the other economies of the world. But today, of course, the Chinese president, he himself has acknowledged that the economic recovery in China is not yet solid till now. So the point is that there are two divergent opinions regarding the Chinese economy, isn't it? Exactly in the same manner, this statement has to be seen. So this statement is being depicted in the positive light about India, that in the next 10, 15 years, India's economy, which is currently at the 5th position, all right, of course, it is going to be the third top 3 economies very soon in next 10 to 15 years. That actually is the analysis. And what is said, it says that it is going to be backed up by the robust democracy and strong partnership. Now, the point is that majority of you actually have come out with this analysis that yes, Indian economy is, let's say, the 5th largest economy, and most likely Indian economy is going to be the 5 trillion economy by 2025, and probably by 2030 or maybe 2035. Indian economy is going to be the 3rd largest economies in the world. That's what actually you have written about it. But you have missed out the fact that you have to also analyze, rather you have to also explain about the significance or the factors behind this particular positive analysis or positive, you can say, opinion of any person that actually has made this statement. So what you were supposed to do, you were supposed to also highlight briefly about the factors for the potential of the growth of Indian economy in the next 10-15 years. So let me tell you what you are supposed to do here. You were supposed to actually bring out here the analysis that yes, this is what actually is expected in next 10 to 15 years. Fine. But this is going to be backed up by the following factors. Fine. And here the factors which have already been mentioned in the question must be read very, very intelligently. It is saying that one of the factors is the robust democracy. So you have to highlight that how democracy is important for the economic growth. All right. So for economic growth. And since in India, what actually has happened in last couple of elections, that we have got the single political power led democracy. All right. So it is not actually a coalition government. So not having a coalition government, of course, makes the government very strong in terms of taking some strong decisions. And you have all the reasons to actually explain over here what all strong decisions have been taken in the last 5 to 6 years by the government of India. So of course, this would actually have to explain in your answer the first factor. Fine. Then you also have to explain about the strong partnership. Now, what is a strong partnership? Now, see, a strong partnership is equally very remarkable in the last few decades, especially in the context of attracting the foreign investment. All right, foreign investment, and the foreign investment can be of course, both FDI and FII. So, of course, attracting foreign investment, especially like the FDI, that is very, very important for the Indian economy. Of course, what we see the last couple of decades, India's relationship with the Americans have improved tremendously. All right, so US is one formidable power from where we are getting the strong partnership. Similarly, European Union, especially like France, Germany, UK. So these are the countries where we are seeing that there's a strong partnership, and you know about this particular fact also, that these countries are the biggest investor. They are the biggest investor in the form of FDI also into the Indian economy. All right. So of course you will have to highlight this. Fine. And not only that, but also you can bring out a small description over here that recently the countries like Japan, Australia, now they have also seen India as a potential market, and of course, due to their differences rising with China, India is going to be the most important, of course, avenue, most important country for their investment in near future. So that's what actually a strong partnership is visible there, isn't it? So now I hope that this point is now being visible to all of you. So what I have found in your answer, you have missed out this particular point completely, in fact. Fine. So after writing, let's say one or two factors, you can also write apart from this, there are other factors also. Let's say the other factors could be the economic reforms. All right. And as you know, that there was a very popular statement made by the Prime Minister of India when he visited to USA in Madison Square. He made a statement that India has a strength of 3 Ds, if you remember that. 3 Ds are democracy, demand, and demographic dividend. Demographic dividend, isn't it? Now you see, democracy is basically a political factor which is going to give a boost to Indian economy. Demand is an economic factor which is going to give a boost to the Indian economy. Demographic dividend is socio-cultural factor which is going to give a dividend to the Indian economy. Hence the idea is the Indian economy is going to get the support of all the possible factors ranging from political, economic, socio-cultural factors. Okay. So what you are supposed to do, you are supposed to add this point also in your answer. Factors. Then you have to write, however, there are various challenges also. All right. Are you getting the point? This has to be your structure of this answer. Now you can analyze how many of you have written on this particular format. None of you, in fact. You have explained one or two lines, that's it, and then you have completed acted, move to the challenges of Indian economy. So now you have to write about the various challenges of Indian economy. Now those challenges could be again ranging from the political challenge, economic challenge, let's say the international challenge. All right. Then also the socio-cultural challenge. Now, under this, you can write certain points, at least 1 or 2 points, very easily. All right, like socio-cultural challenge could be written in the context of, let's say, the importance of the cultural harmony. So, cultural harmony is very important for economic growth. Fine, if you have a cultural, you can say, tension, or you have communal tension, or you have ethnic tension, you cannot actually grow. So, it is also important to have a very cultural, you can say, peace and harmony. Fine. At the same time, in the social factor, you have to analyze, you have to write that we will have to promote our workers as skilled workers in India. We have to prepare our workers for the artificial intelligence in India. Are you getting a point? Because this is going to be the next decade economy based upon. I mean, by 2030, let me tell you one thing very clearly. By 2030, artificial intelligence is going to rule the world. So, in the next 10 years, if India does not prepare for artificial intelligence and its essential, you can say, technological aspects, India is again going to miss out the entire journey, entire train, in fact. So, therefore, you have to write about that in social factor. Of course, we have to make our workers, our laborers, train enough to handle the impact of artificial intelligence. Fine. Similarly, international challenge you have to write in the context of the policies of protectionism adopted by various nations in the world. All right. Similarly, the kind of COVID-19 impact, which has again, let's say, you get brought recession in many countries in the world. All right, that's another very important factor. Fine. Thirdly, of course, the countries are not willing to invest, and most importantly, India has not become a part of RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, from where India could gain some more investment from the Southeast Asian nations being a part of RCEP. So again, that's another challenge for Indian economy. Fine. Similarly, economic challenge you have to highlight that India lacks infrastructure, and it is very important to understand, as much as your infrastructure is increased or improved, your GDP is consequently going to improve. For example, let me tell you, the investment that you put up in infrastructure, same investment results into, or rather translates into, the growth of your GDP. For example, I'll give you one example to understand it clearly. If today's your GDP is not increasing, rather it has not increased, or rather it is decreasing, it has come down to, let's say, even 2 to 3% of India's GDP. That is 2 to 3% it is in the GDP currently. It simply means the investment on infrastructure has come down to 2 to 3%. Simple. There's a simple economic logic that you have to apply here. ठीक है, जितना इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में आप इन्वेस्ट करेंगे उतना ही जीडीपी में आपका ग्रोथ होगा. दैट्स व्हाट इज द फंडामेंटल प्रिंसिपल ऑफ इकोनॉमी. Fine. So infrastructure is declining, investment in infrastructure is declining, and therefore GDP is also declining in the under the impact of COVID-19. Fine. Top of that, of course, we are also facing a problem of the lack of technology. Lack of technology apart from infrastructure. And because of these factors, of course, even we have not been able to attract good number of FDI on infrastructure. Fine. So, of course, that is another economic factor. Then, similarly, in the political factor, all right. So, you can have to write about the rise of social tension, the rise in protest, the rise of violence, or increase in violence. Now, these all are actually dooming the prospect of investment in Indian economy. You can cite a recent example also. Example of what has happened in the Apple factory in Bangalore just 10 days back, in fact. Fine. So these examples from the current affairs you have to add on to simply support your argument. Fine. Now this is what you are supposed to write in your answer comprehensively and completely. Fine. I hope this is clear to all of you. Fine. So in this context only, you have to analyze this particular question number 1. ठीक है, तो ये स्ट्रक्चर होता है आंसर का, ये स्ट्रक्चर आपके आंसर में होने चाहिए. दैट्स कंपल्सरी इन फैक्ट टू फेच वेरी गुड मार्क्स इन योर जीएस. फाइन. Now let us get to the next one.
सर
हाँ रोहित. हाँ
सर ये जो इकोनॉमिक सर्वे में जो वेल्थ क्रिएशन का जो चैप्टर है अपना,
हाँ
उसमें वो इनविजिबल हैंड ऑफ वेल्थ सपोर्टेड बाय इनविजिबल हैंड ऑफ ट्रस्ट जो है, तो ये भी एक चैलेंज होगा ना सर इंडियन इकोनॉमी को उस पर्टिकुलर इसमें लाने के लिए?
So that, I mean, idea is in economic survey, there are a lot of technical words that they use. Fine. You don't have to give this impression that everyone knows about that. Suppose invisible hand, that's a technical word. I mean, you will have to explain what you mean by invisible hand or invisible, you can say, factor that is playing a role. So you'll have to, let's take another, let's say, I would say a couple of sentences to only explain what you want to communicate to the examiner. You have to keep it very simple. In fact, you don't have to use the technical jargons in your answer. What you have understood from economic survey, you can simply quote here that even according to economic survey 2019-20, this is also one of the you can say challenges to the economy. Fine. That's what actually you can explain, but it has to be very simple in language that anyone can understand. That's what actually is, it is a paper of GS. Fine. So that's what actually you have to take precaution when you use certain jargons of economy. So that's the reason why avoid using jargons. Whatever you have understood, that's good. But you have to use those understanding in your own language in a very crystal clear manner. ठीक है, तो जीएस में मार्क्स ज्यादा अच्छा आएगा. जार्गन्स यूज करेंगे ना तो फिर कट जाएगा मार्क्स, अच्छा मार्क्स नहीं आते हैं.
हाँ, ये थोड़ा ये प्रॉब्लम हो गया सर इस आंसर लिखने में, क्योंकि व्हाट आई डिड इज आउट ऑफ द 4 or 5 रीजंस चैलेंजेस व्हिच आई हैव एनक्लोज्ड इन द आंसर, मोस्टली मैंने सर वो इकोनॉमिक सर्वे से ही डाला है. 5 ट्रिलियन इकोनॉमी का है तो उसमें क्या प्रॉब्लम्स है, फिर जो वेल्थ क्रिएशन जो करना होगा जिसमें जीडीपी लेवल पे अपने को एंटरप्रेन्योर्स क्रिएट करना है, राइट, तो उसको कंटिन्यूएशन में रखना. फिर वो आईएमएफ ने सर रिसेंटली अभी बोला ना कि इंडिया इज द फ्रॉम द हाईएस्ट टू द स्लगिश ग्रोथ हो गया है, -10.2 का है, तो कंटिन्यूइंग दैट इन नॉमिनल ग्रोथ. ये सब चैलेंजेस सर लिख दिया है, तो आई थिंक इट इज अ वन डायमेंशनल आंसर व्हिच आई हैव रिटन.
Actually, that's why you have to. That's it. That is the reason why you have to avoid this sort of overbearing of any idea in your answer.
Yes.
All right. You have to keep your mind open because it is a paper of GS, and you will have to incorporate various dimensions in your answer. Now, suppose if there is any valid point that is mentioned or analyzed there in economic survey, and you're writing this particular factor about economic factor, suppose. Yes. Now, while writing the economic factor, you can quote one sentence that even according to economic survey, this is a challenge in the economy. That's what. That is sufficient. More than sufficient.
So actually ऐसा लगता है कि वो फ्रेमवर्क एक रहता है ना सर जीएस का, पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमिक्स तो सर वो लगता है कि ये बहुत इजी हो जाएगा, तो थोड़ा एक गवर्नमेंट के भाषा में ही लिखना ठीक रहेगा आंसर जीएस का.
नहीं, you have to write in a very general perspective, in a language which is easily communicative to the examiner, because understand this is what actually would be a challenge for you when you get into the service.
Yes, sir.
Because you are not going to communicate to the government, you are going to communicate to the public. Public are not so smart, so not so literate, not so educated. So yes, you have to translate those jargons into simple language so that the public can understand. And that exactly is the training in GS answer.
Yes, sir.
ठीक है, तो ये रखना ध्यान में. हाँ.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So coming to this issue, that is the next one, that is evaluate the performance of Niti Aayog and how far it has addressed the issues in the mobilization of resources in India. See, there are two aspects which have been added into this particular question. First is itself is a, I would say it's a completely a long answer that can be written on this particular issue of performance of Niti Aayog and its evaluation. But you have to restrain yourself within 150 words only. So that's actually a challenge in fact. All right. So what you have to do, Of course, you have to come out with the point format of answer writing style. There's no other alternative in this particular question. तो point form में ही answer लिखना है. That's compulsory in fact in GS. Now, secondly, that of course, when you evaluate the performance of Niti Aayog, on what basis you will evaluate the performance of Niti Aayog? So, what is the idea? Idea is that see, Niti Aayog has been constituted for the purpose of India's new journey of development. That's what you all know. Fine. And Niti Aayog has been functional on various aspects. Now, there is nothing that is now left which is now not under the coverage of नीति आयोग. ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है अब जो बचा हुआ जो नीति आयोग के डोमेन में नहीं आता है. For example, let me tell you, they cover the political aspect of the country. They also cover the economic aspect of the country. They even also cover the social aspect of the country. They also talk about the cultural aspect of the country. They also speak about the energy security of the country. They also talk about the internal security of the country. Fine. So now you can see that these areas, let me tell you at least the internal security aspect. All right, even defense aspect. Now these areas were not at all a part of Planning Commission when Planning Commission was there in function. Planning Commission was limited to this and at the backs of this. Fine. Now idea is that these areas are the newly added dimensions in Niti Aayog. Now, this is the reason why I just told you that there is nothing now which has been left away from the domain of Niti Aayog. So everything is a part of Niti Aayog's, you can say, area of activity. So therefore, you have to understand in this question, you can write even, let's say, 500 words answer. But you have to restrain yourself and you have to write it in the only 100 words. That's actually a challenge. So therefore, it is important what you have to do when you evaluate the performance of Niti Aayog, you will have to highlight. Then let us see Niti Aayog performance of the political factor, political dimension. What it has been able to do for last, let's say, almost 5 years now. Fine. 5 years ho gaya Niti Aayog ka. So last 5 years, what actually it has done, it has promoted the spirit of cooperative and competitive federalism. Competitive federalism. Fine. Isn't it? So that's what actually is one dimension. Fine. You can also highlight what are the challenges here in the competitive and cooperative federalism, especially cooperative federalism. Many states are still not very much eager to participate in the meetings of Niti Aayog. You can simply write about the state like West Bengal and Tamil Nadu had already boycotted. They don't send their chief ministers to participate in the meetings of Niti Aayog. So obviously these examples you have to highlight that this is the evaluation of the political factor of Niti Aayog in fact. Similarly in economic, you can write about that they have started coming with the economic performance index, infrastructure performance index. So these indices or index actually have given us a sort of a, you can say, spirit of competitive federalism can also be seen in economic aspect. All right, this is how they are trying to bring out one level of development across all the states in India. That's what actually is the agenda of Niti Aayog. All right, they want to bring, let's say, state like Bihar with the parallel to the state like Kerala. So therefore, they have been trying to promote the spirit of competitive federalism. So in economic aspect also, they have come out with a lot of indices where the infrastructure performance index, economic performance index, and various other schemes performance index has also come out from Niti Aayog. However, there's a big limitation of Niti Aayog that they do not have the financial allocation power. All right. So of course, that's the biggest limitation of Niti Aayog in this way. Similarly, in social aspect, you have to write about, they have come out with the education performance index, health performance index, the SDGs performance index. All right. So here also again they have been promoting about these all index and under the spirit of cooperative federalism only. Fine. So that we can understand about which all states, which all districts, which all regions are actually underdeveloped, untapped in India till now. So this is how they are trying to bring every state, every district on at par with each other. That's what actually they have been doing. However, another limitation is that, of course, the data collection is something which is still a doubtful issue in India, because we don't get the proper data for other, let's say for other surveys. All right. So data collection is still one of the limitations as far as performance Niti Aayog is concerned, because Niti Aayog does not have the trained staff, the trained institution to collect data from every district and every locality in India. Fine, that's a limitation there. Similarly, in cultural index, they have come out with also the cultural promotion programs. Fine, that's another activity they have been doing. Similarly, energy, they have been trying to promote clean energy, clean fuel energy across India. Fine. In the context of that only, they have also promoted the solar, wind power, isn't it? So this all actually you have to analyze. Internal security, of course, they have also come out with the regular meeting between the states of India on internal security matters. But at the same time, there has been a criticism of Niti Aayog that when they proposed about a particular patch up with the NSCN faction of Northeast region, they did not invite the states like Assam, states like Manipur, states like even Nagaland. So they complained about it, that why the states of the state chief ministers were not invited about the pact between the government and the NSCN faction over there. So of course that's a limitation in that way. Fine. So this is how you will have to evaluate the performance of Niti Aayog. That's one aspect of your answer. Fine. And if you don't write it in point form, you are not going to complete this answer in a comprehensive manner, because I just told you it has a full potential to be written in more than 500 words also. Fine. But you have to restrain yourself in the context of understanding the area where it functions and its performance over the last 5 to 6 years. That's it. Fine. Then the second aspect is how far it has addressed the issues of mobilization of resources in India. Now see, this is equally very important aspect of your answer. Now, how far it has been able to attract or secure the mobilization of resources. Now, first of all, you have to understand what you mean by mobilization of resources. If you see your syllabus of your GS paper 3, there's a word called mobilization of resources mentioned very clearly just after a word called planning. Now, the point is that, of course, now we don't have planning the way it was there in the five-year plan. All right. But now we are having Niti Aayog, and since we are having Niti Aayog, which has replaced the Planning Commission, so this particular aspect of mobilization resources has now come under the one of the responsibilities of Niti Aayog. Fine. So what do you mean by mobilization resources then? Mobilization resources means primarily, of course, it is financial. It is financial and human resource. All right. Resources can be of many types in fact. You all know about it in geography, you must have gone through it. But let us be very specific in the context of economy. So it is primarily in the context of financial and human resources. So of course, in the financial resources, what all resources do we have, or rather we actually try to get? We try to get it the taxable resources or the non-taxable resources. All right. So taxable resources could be both direct and indirect. Now you have to find out that Niti Aayog had played a role also in the final formulation of GST in India. So GST is the biggest, you can say, reform of the government of India in last, you can say, more than 2 decades. So of course, that's another important dimension that Niti Aayog has played a role in the context of final formulation of GST. Similarly, Niti Aayog has also supported Indian government to constitute a committee to review the entire concept of direct tax code in India. All right. So that is also being reviewed currently, in fact. Fine. That's another factor that you have to highlight here. Fine. Then you have to also highlight about the non-taxable proceeds, especially in the context of the foreign investment. So in the context of foreign investment, of course, you can understand that Niti Aayog has been instrumental in suggesting and recommending the government of India regarding many of the reforms which have been undertaken in terms of either labor reforms, environmental reforms, and even land reforms. So in all these aspects, as a factor of production, in the factors of production, Niti Aayog has played a role in terms of course, recommending to the government and suggesting to the government to bring reforms in every aspect, land, labor, and even the environmental reforms. So, of course, in this context also, it has tried to mobilize resources in the form of foreign investment. All right, and that's the reason why the ease of doing business index of India has been improving for last so many years. All right. Similarly, in human resource also, Niti Aayog has recommended for launching Atal Innovation Mission. Atal Innovation Mission emphasized upon innovation, emphasized upon the training, skill. All right. These all factors have been also emphasized by Niti Aayog on mobilizing of human resources in this country. Now, that's what actually you were supposed to explain in your answer. ठीक है, तो ये समझना होगा कि पहले तो मोबिलाइजेशन रिसोर्सेज का मतलब क्या है, ये पूरा एक कॉन्सेप्ट है, और फिर वहां पे नीति आयोग को आपको जोड़ना होगा, और यूपीएससी इज डूइंग द सेम एक्सरसाइज फॉर यू. अगर आप क्वेश्चंस को बड़ी आसानी से और बड़ी आराम से एनालाइज करेंगे बैठ के घर पे भी ना, पिछले 2-3 साल के क्वेश्चंस को, तो आपको ये समझ में आ जाएगा कि यूपीएससी कर क्या रही है, कि जो सिलेबस के वर्ड्स है, they are trying to mix up the two or three words together and then they are framing a question for you. Just see it. I mean, I'm telling you this particular idea on the basis of my analysis of the question paper. They are mixing up 2 to 3 concepts, mixing up 2 to 3, you can say, wordings of your syllabus together, and then framing a question and asking you to write on this. Exactly a similar way they can do it in the context of Niti Aayog. Because just after planning, it is written about mobilization of resources. So definitely, if you see the trend of UPSC in terms of asking a question on planning, they've almost exhausted almost all the questions that could be asked on the issue of planning in Niti Aayog. They've already asked you differentiate between Planning Commission and Niti Aayog. They've already asked you the rationale behind the formation of Niti Aayog. Now, the third area which is not yet asked is evaluation of Niti Aayog and Niti Aayog being mixed up with the mobilization of resources, how it is going to play, or rather how it is playing a role in mobilization of resources in India. So this is important issue for all of you, even for this year's main examination. Fine. इसलिए इसको तैयार करना अच्छे से. Now, coming to next one, that is, to what extent financial inclusion is instrumental in the attainment of the objectives for inclusive growth. See, this is another very simple, straightforward question. But the question is, to what extent? ये word बहुत important है, बहुत important. I don't know how many of you have understood it. See, what is saying? It is saying that to what extent?
Sir, actually, I have a doubt in the previous question.
हाँ, कौन? अक्षय, अच्छा.
Akshay, sir.
हाँ, नाम बता दीजिए ताकि उस समझ में
Sir,
आए.
in the
Otherwise,
last question, yes, sir. So in the last question, the second aspect was asking about how far it has addressed the issue in mobilization of resources.
right.
So do we have to write the aspect in which Niti Aayog has not yet achieved what it meant to achieve?
Of course, bringing a few limitations, especially in the context of the target that we have set as far as investment or infrastructure is concerned, it has not been mobilized till now. Therefore, in the light of that only, the national infrastructure pipeline has been proposed recently. Earlier, if you remember, according to 12 5-year plan only, the target that they had been set was to raise $1 trillion to invest on infrastructure. And out of this $1 trillion, 50 is to 50%, in fact, 50:50 ratio was to be raised through the public and private sectors. Fine. And when Niti Aayog was formed in 2015, the 12 5-year plan was still going on. still they had not been able to achieve this target of $1 trillion to be invested in infrastructure. And then what they did, they actually put a target, or they set a new target to raise 4.5 trillion US dollar by 2030 to be invested in infrastructure. So this is a mammoth target. It's a huge target. Of course, Niti Aayog has not been very, you can say, instrumental in raising even that much of level of money in the past. There's no guarantee that they will be able to raise the money in this particular time. That too, the time of when there is a lack of investment, and that's exactly the point where you have to substantiate it. That therefore, in the national infrastructure pipeline, you see the contribution of private sector. Your answer is with you now.
Yes, sir. Yes,
All
sir.
right. So that is the point. Fine. All right. So that's what actually was discussing with all of you. Now, this is the next one. That is, to what extent financial inclusion is okay. Now, see here, you have two aspects. One is financial inclusion and how far it is instrumental in attainment of the objectives of inclusive growth. So first and foremost, you will have to analyze what you mean by inclusive growth and what are its objectives. So what is exactly inclusive growth? Anyone who would like to say
Inclusive
something?
growth is an. So can I say?
Sure, go.
So, so inclusive growth is an aspect in which all dimensions of the country are taken care of. For example, there should be inclusion in economy, there should be inclusion in the society, there should be political inclusion. All these different factors combine to form an inclusive growth.
Okay.
Sir,
Ha.
sir, can I go?
Go ahead.
Sir, in inclusive growth, we not only create opportunities for the people, but also give access to that opportunities for them.
Very good. Very nice.
And sir, that assets should be at a affordable price, sir.
Of course, right. That's exactly right. Right analysis. See, inclusive growth as an idea has been proposed by ADB, Asian Development Bank. Fine. And Asian Development Bank, when they came out with this report, fine, that is a strategy 2020. In this report only, they had come out with this particular concept of inclusive growth. And the sheer idea of inclusive growth actually has got the ideological background from the idea of Amartya Sen. See, Amartya Sen had long back given a concept of capability approach. Fine. Now, what was capability approach given by Amartya Sen? See, Amartya Sen simply said that of course every individual has a potential to, of course, optimize in their life, optimize in terms of their, of course, access of the good things in their life. It is only the kind of environment and the kind of support that we provide to an individual makes a difference. If someone is, let's say, an IAS, or someone is not an IAS, it is all due to the access of resources. It is all due to the access of ideas and resources. Every individual has the potential to excel in their life. That actually was a belief of Amartya Sen. Now, in the light of that only, what did he mention? He mentioned that first and foremost, to actually have the capability approach, a state will have to work for two areas. One is health, another one is education. So everyone should get the proper health and proper education in India and across the globe also. Fine. So if these two things are available for everyone, and then if you create opportunities for everyone, then of course a person who is healthy from the mind, who is healthy from the physique, who is also healthy from their knowledge, of course, they will able to grab these opportunities. Fine. And once they are able to grab these opportunities, they are able to excel in their life. Fine. So the point is, what is capability approach? Capability approach is basically to see every individual from the perspective of having some of the other potential in him or her. Fine. And that potential can only be optimized if the state, that's very important observation made by Amit Sinha, if the state is able to provide the opportunities, and at the same time, those opportunities are diffused among the individuals. Now see, inclusive growth says the same thing. Now what it says? It says that a state owes a responsibility of what? Of creating opportunities, all right? And once you create opportunities, you also will have to create an environment for a proper diffusion of these opportunities among everyone. Diffusion of opportunities. That's very important observation of inclusive growth. What do you mean diffusion? Diffusion simply means that whether I am or else other ones are able to access those opportunities or not. Suppose इकोनॉमी में जॉब्स है, इकोनॉमी में जॉब्स है, बट वो जॉब्स है बीपीओ सेक्टर में, वो जॉब्स है आईटी सेक्टर में. How many people from the village area, from the rural background, would be able to grab this job? None of them. The point is, therefore, it is important to understand the concept of inclusive growth. It's a holistic concept which does not only talk about creating opportunities, but also talks about creating an individual to grab those opportunities. And then we can create growth inclusive in India. Otherwise, growth is very parochial, narrow, exclusive, not inclusive. Growth is happening in India for last, let's say, 3 decades, since 1991. But this growth is being reaped by, the benefit of this growth is being reaped by only the elite class, the haves, not the have-nots. That is the idea of inclusive growth. Okay? So now see, this is what is inclusive growth. Now to have inclusive growth or to achieve inclusive growth, the state will have to act upon it. Now how the state can act upon it? The state can act upon it by, of course, creating that environment where everyone can grab these opportunities, and top of that, that people who are on the margin of society, they should be able to also grab these opportunities. But how will they grab these opportunities? They can grab these opportunities through proper health, education, and skill. So health, education, and skill, if this is provided, that they are able to grab this skill, the opportunities. But how will they able to get this health, education, and skill? They can only be able to get this health, education, and skill through direct contact with the government. All right, and here comes the relevance of the concept of Jan Dhan Aadhaar Mobile Trinity, JAM Trinity. Now see, JAM Trinity as a concept which has become quite popular in India in last 5 to 6 years. Now this as a concept, of course, had been spoken by C. Rangarajan committee long back in 2008 itself. Now see, C. Rangarajan committee was the first committee which actually talked about the importance of financial inclusion in India. Now why did he talk about that? He said that in India it is difficult for the government to reach out to the margin of the population in this country. Now the government is trying to reach out to them via various agencies, which includes the political setup, which includes the bureaucracy, which includes many other intermediaries into that. And because of that only, they have not been able to reach out to the margin of society in this country. Therefore, C. Rangarajan Committee recommended to the Government of India to achieve inclusive growth. It is prerequisite. It is prerequisite. It is essential to achieve first financial inclusion. And without financial inclusion, the government will not be able to reach out to every individual in this country. Until the time every individual is not getting the benefit of the growth of Indian economy, we will not be able to achieve inclusive growth. Fine. So the simple idea is this. Now you can see on the screen. You don't have to only create the opportunities, but you have to also diffuse these opportunities. And to diffuse these opportunities, there has to be direct contact with the government of the individuals. And this financial inclusion finally will result into inclusive growth in this country. So A plus B plus C will result into inclusive growth in this country. Otherwise, we will keep struggling on inclusive growth. Fine. So financial inclusion is the important or the prerequisite condition for inclusive growth. And what is the very important analysis? Rangarajan Committee once remarked very, very clearly. He said that, see in your own surrounding, find out the people who are at the margin of the society, who are the deprived ones, who are the disadvantaged ones. Who are these people? They are the rickshaw pullers. They are the, of course, the migrant workers. They are the domestic helps. All right. And these people who are in the margin of society, who are very poor, who are in the margin of society, these guys are also financially excluded in India. It's ironical to understand this particular point, that those who are economically excluded, they are socially also excluded in India, or vice versa. Those who are socially excluded, they are also economically excluded in this country. Because you ask your maid, you ask your servant, you ask your domestic help, they will say, or rather they used to say, probably today they have come out with this particular scheme, benefit of the scheme, but they used to say they don't have bank account. They have never visited to any bank. They don't know what is the meaning of health insurance. What's the meaning of life insurance? Now that is the status of majority of Indians in this country. All right. On the other hand, if you compare India with even China, now India has somewhere around 36% of financial inclusion. In China, it is 54%. In USA, it is 91%. In France, it is 98%. And let me tell you, in France, to have a bank account is a fundamental right. All right. So in France, to have a bank account is a fundamental right, which is not even recognized in India. It is only after this particular committee's recommendation, the government realized that's actually the limitation. हम पहुंचेंगे कैसे उस आम जनता के पास? सरकार पहुंचेगी कैसे? वाया मीडिया, वाया इंटरमीडियरीज, और इंटरमीडियरीज के कारण ही इंडिया में इतना करप्शन है और इतना लीकेजेस है. So remove these intermediaries. Let's have a direct contact between the government and the beneficiary, and then only we will achieve inclusive growth. So कैसे होगा वो direct contact? Go for this financial inclusion will be achieved through JAM Trinity, and here Nandan Nilekani Committee assisted the government of India. So Nandan Nilekani Committee finally recommended for going for Aadhaar and then Jan Dhan Yojana and this mobile and link it through this, you will reach out to every individual in this country. And through this only we can also go for DBT scheme, direct benefit transfer scheme in this country, which will save crores and crores of rupees of the government of India in terms of getting wasted, getting leaked out in this entire process. This is the idea. This is what actually you have to explain your answer. Okay. So to what extent? To the extent of course, understanding this fact that, of course, without financial inclusion, objectives of inclusive growth in India will not be able to be achieved. Reason being, India being a vast country, having a population of more than 1.35 billion, of course, it is not possible for the government to reach out to everyone except through financial inclusion. So once financial inclusion will be made mandatory and compulsory, then only the government will be able to reach out to every individual who really needs benefit in this country. All right. And one fundamental principle of inclusive growth is this: inclusive growth cannot be compared with any other ordinary government schemes of the past. It cannot be compared with any other poverty alleviation programs of the government of India in the past. Because unlike poverty alleviation program, which makes a beneficiary as a passive recipient of the benefits, in the poverty alleviation programs, they had made the beneficiaries as passive recipients of the benefits. Inclusive growth talks about, or rather pushes forward, the idea of making an individual inclusive in the context of being an active recipient of the government benefit. ठीक है? So what you have to argue कि inclusive growth से होता क्या है, होगा क्या, कि जो beneficiaries हैं हमारे country में, they will not be becoming a burden on the government for a long time. ये भी समझना important है आपके लिए, because you are going to be the future bureaucrats. So you'll have to understand it, that yes, we'll have to provide the benefit to every individual, but that does not mean for the entire life they should remain dependent upon the government. You will have to make them, or rather you have to enable them to eke out their own livelihood after receiving the benefits in initial days, so that they can stand up on their own feet. That is inclusive growth. Fine. So to achieve this, of course, you need financial inclusion, and without this, India, or country like India, can't be able to achieve the objectives of inclusive growth early. That's actually the point. Fine. So I've given the complete idea about inclusive growth. अब इसमें कुछ भी आएगा, you will be able to write it completely.
Sir.
हाँ.
Sir, अगर question ऐसे पूछा जाए कि what measures can be suggested in future to achieve inclusive growth?
Right.
तो इस केस में सर, जैसे फ्रांस में फंडामेंटल राइट है, तो इंडिया में is it practically feasible to make it a fundamental right?
Why not? There's nothing wrong in that. I mean, how does it actually create any problem for any country? Rather, it is going to add more wealth, more revenue, more resources to the bank. So if everyone will be having a fundamental right to open a bank account. So probably it will actually add a lot of wealth to the nation. Fine. So of course, this can be also suggested. It can be given as a recommendation or a suggestion to the government. Of course, you can go ahead with this.
Yes,
sir. सर यदि सिर्फ इंक्लूसिव ग्रोथ का क्वेश्चन आता है पेपर में, तो हमें डिफरेंट पर्सपेक्टिव को भी देखना पड़ेगा, जैसे डिजिटल इंक्लूजन, फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन.
Why not? Of course, why not? You will have to include even these aspects as well. That in inclusive growth now today we are also having a challenge of the digital exclusion. In fact, so without having digital inclusion, we can't also achieve financial inclusion. And without having let's say financial inclusion, we can't achieve inclusive growth. So the way inclusive growth, financial inclusion is prerequisite. Similarly, for financial inclusion, digital inclusion is also prerequisite. All
Okay,
right,
sir.
so they can write it about. That's the reason why, I mean, these days you can see Government of India is going for Digital India and PM 1E scheme. So this PM 1E scheme is equally important for all of you now. Take care. So
Okay.
you have to add on this. Fine. So this question, that is technology missions in farming, will be discussed tomorrow. Fine. Because this is the important area, and tomorrow we'll be having discussion with Kiran sir, who will take up all these aspects of technology in one go. Fine. The next question is sweet revolution and how it help farmers and migrant workers. It was in news, in fact, and I hope that all of you were aware of this. And as in fact, you were aware of this. So it is in the context of the honey mission, all right. And of course, honey is being promoted in India by the government only, and it is in the context of helping the farmers and also the migrant workers, especially during the time of lockdown, when the migrant workers went back to their home, started going back to their home. Of course, the states like UP, Maharashtra, Jharkhand, they also started distributing the free of cost, you can say the instrument to, of course, rear the bees. That is apiculture, is part of apiculture. So they started going for free distribution of those instruments for these migrant workers. And for the farmers also, it is helpful. How? Because it can support them through the subsidiary activity. All right. So subsidiary activity like animal rearing, apiculture could be also subsidiary activity. And to achieve the target of doubling the farmers' income, this is one of the other solutions of the government of India. That's right. Is a point. So there's nothing to be discussed much over here, except that how it has to be understood and has to be written in this context. Now, see, this is another very important question, and I believe this question can be asked to you again at any point of time. Discuss the factors and trend of changing cropping pattern in India in the post-production era. Now, see, in this question, what was supposed to be written here? First of all, you must be having a fair idea about the cropping pattern. What is actually a cropping pattern? What are the factors which play a role in settling down a cropping pattern? See, cropping pattern is defined as a particular trend, a particular practice, which is being done in a particular area for quite a long period of time to grow certain crops. All right. So if in a particular area, certain crops are being grown for a long period of time in a similar fashion, that's what actually we can say it's a cropping pattern of that area. Fine. But the point is that you have to explain here is this, that in the post liberalization era, that is especially after 1980s onwards, what changes you are noticing in the cropping pattern? And those changes are being influenced by what all factors? All right, what all factors and what is the trend of changing cropping pattern there? So obviously you have to explain about the impact of LPG on the cropping pattern in India. So impact of liberalization, privatization and globalization on cropping pattern of India. So in the context of this only, you will have to explain about the impact of, let's say, the idea of the market led forces which actually compelled the farmers to grow more of cash crops. All right. So the cash crop would be the very first factor, the first you can say trend that has been seen in the Indian farming system. And why the cash crop? Because of the demand in the market. All right. So of course that is one factor which played a role. Similarly, you have to write about the factors from the government side. Even the government also started promoting the change in the cropping pattern by highlighting few of the crops outrightly. And the best example is, which is being debated today in India, that is MSP. All right. So of course, MSP of wheat and paddy has played a very instrumental role in changing the cropping pattern of many states, many regions in India. Example, you can quote very easily about Punjab and Haryana. So Punjab and Haryana, which used to be a belt of wheat and maize earlier. Of course, today it has become a belt of even paddy. So that is completely a changing cropping pattern in that way. Fine. Similarly, you have to also write about, let's say, the changing cropping pattern in the context of giving prominence to the pulses these days, oil seeds these days, because the demand of pulses and oil seeds has also gone up. All right, India is still importing these all items even till today. So these are the factors which are playing a role in the changing cropping pattern in the post-liberalization era. Not important. In fact, these all three factors, but also the factor like contract farming. All right. So APMC Act was also amended. APMC model law was amended in 2003. And in 2003, when it was amended, the government introduced a couple of changes in this APMC law in 2003. Those changes were, A, of course, contract farming was allowed for the first time in India. And second, the Farmers Produce Organization, FPOs. Farmers Produce Organizations, FPOs, were allowed to be formed as a parallel mandis, parallel cooperative mandis of the farmers in India. So therefore, in the field of horticulture, we saw a radical change, a revolutionary change in horticulture. Because today now you see the fruits are being marketed in India through the FPOs. APMC mandis are not dealing in the fruits and vegetables. Fine. So these are changes that you have to analyze in the post-liberalization era. There's changing cropping pattern in India. Not only that, but also due to the access of the irrigation, the water. It also brought a huge change in the cropping pattern in India. Fine. So the access of water, especially in the regions like northern Indian belt, of course, it has led to also shifting of many farmers to actually from the normal crops to the water guzzling crops. So water guzzling crops like rice, sugarcane, they are the water guzzling crops. So this is also a changing cropping pattern in India. Now, because of these changing cropping pattern also, there have been certain economic, ecological, and health issues which have cropped up in India in last couple of decades, after 1980s onwards, in fact. तो वो भी थोड़ा सा आपको 2 पॉइंट लिख देना है उसमें. That's what actually is the answer. ठीक है? Now this will be also discussed tomorrow. That is Industrial Revolution 4.0.
Sir,
हाँ रोहित बोलिए.
सॉइल हेल्थ कार्ड का जो प्रोग्राम है जो गवर्नमेंट का, उसके वजह से भी इम्पैक्ट हुआ है ना सर क्रॉपिंग पैटर्न में?
बिल्कुल, उससे भी इम्पैक्ट हुआ है. क्रेडिट फैसिलिटीज जहां जहां मिला है उनको, वहां पे भी क्रॉपिंग पैटर्न चेंज हुआ है खासकर. बिल्कुल बिल्कुल. सो सॉइल हेल्थ कार्ड का डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन, क्रेडिट कार्ड का डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन, ऑलराइट, दिस ऑल एक्चुअली हैव प्लेड अ रोल. ठीक है. किसान क्रेडिट कार्ड हैज आल्सो प्लेड अ रोल इन दैट. So in fact, after 1980s, whatever agricultural reforms that you can remember, that they all have played a role in the changing cropping pattern in India. So you have to either, let's say, classify it in the domestic factors that play a role in changing cropping pattern, and also international factors, that is external factors, that also played a role in the changing cropping pattern in India. So both the factors together played a role in the changing cropping pattern in India. And then you can classify it. That's another way of writing this answer. ठीक है, तो ऐसे भी लिख सकते हैं आप. अब पढ़िए क्वेश्चन. My mouth is now.
India is food self-sufficient but not food secured country even in 2020. Critically examine the statement.
Correct. Now this is a statement which is absolutely true about India. There's no doubt about it. So first and foremost, what do you mean by food self-sufficiency? How do you understand food self-sufficiency? Now see, food self-sufficiency means that economy is not dependent upon import of food. Now, if your economy, or rather if the country is not dependent upon the import of food, Now, this status is not at food self-sufficiency. Fine. Now, what do you mean by then food security? Food security is a state where one has access. One is able to access, afford, and avail food material for all time. So food security is defined as the accessibility, the affordability, the availability of the food materials for all time to come. This status is known as food security. If I go by the definition given by FAO,
ensuring all people at all times.
yes, so Food and Agriculture Organization FAO says that not only food for all time is actually going to be a food security status, rather food which is nutritious. That's very important observation. Food which is nutritious, which can lead an active and healthy life in an individual. So idea is the food which is nutritious can lead to active and healthy life for an individual. That status is known as a status of food security. Now, this is what actually the definition of food security for all of us. Fine. So we have understood the meaning of food self-sufficiency. We have understood food security. The question is, India is food self-sufficient yet not food secure, even in 2020. On what basis do we say this? We say it in the context of that since India does not, or the India is not at all dependent upon the import of food materials currently, except few items like pulses and oilseeds. All right. Yet India is producing somewhere around 293 million tons of food per year. That's actually the production of food materials in India. That's a huge sum. India has kept a target of also increasing it to 350 million tons by 2025. So this is the target India has kept it. Fine. Of course, India is, in this context, India is food self-sufficient. Now, India does not import a huge volume of food material the way India used to import it. Fine. Now, this status of India's food self-sufficiency does not guarantee India to become a food secured country. Now, why? Because 293 million tons of food grains are definitely sufficient, but the 1.35 billion population of India, the 1.35 billion population of India, they are not able to access, afford, and avail food for all time in a nutritious condition to lead an active and healthy life. And this is corroborated by various surveys and various indices published by either the local and international agencies. The most important to quote here would be the Global Hunger Index. Now, the Global Hunger Index simply mentions India. Even in 2020, India's position is at 94th out of 107 countries. So India is at 94th position out of 107 countries. That's what actually the GHI report suggests. The recently outlined NFHS report, that is National Family Health Survey Report 5, has indicated that Indian children are malnourished in the range of 37%. Not only that, but they are equally anemic. They are also anemic. So they are not only malnourished, but also they are anemic. So now you can understand more than 1/3 of your children are malnourished and anemic. On what basis do you say that India is a world power? That is actually the question mark. Fine. So these are the indicators which indicate India's condition is not so sound, and that's the reason why in the SDG Sustainable Development Goals, goal number 2 and 3.
Zero hunger.
Yes, 2 and 3 are equally very important for India to achieve as early as possible. And in this context, you must write, in this context, the government has launched Poshan Abhiyan. Poshan launch किया गया था ना अभी. Poshan Abhiyan. So apart from the Food Security Act of 2013, apart from the National Food Security Mission of the Government of India, the government has brought up the National Poshan Abhiyan to primarily target the malnourished children and anemic children in India. And the government is trying to provide them the nutritious food items. Therefore, in 2020, we are still facing the problem of hunger, starvation, and malnourishment in this country. And that is exactly a challenge for any government and any system of bureaucracy in India. Fine. This is what you have to analyze. All right. Now, you can read the next question.
Sir, Sir, this question states that we have to critically examine this statement.
Right.
So critically means we have to prove this statement wrong in a sense, na, sir? We have to also say that to a certain extent, our country is food secured.
Not exactly that you have to always prove it wrong. What you have to do in critical examination, that of course, at one hand, India is suggesting, or India has had already projected, India is a food self-sufficient country because of this much of production, having, let's say, food godowns full of, let's say, stuffs. All right, buffer stocks are completely with Indian government. Fine, these are the claims. However, on the other hand, we have this particular problem. Fine. Now we have to critically examine the context of that. We have done a lot of schemes. We have launched a lot of schemes. We have done a lot of, we can say, taken a lot of measures in the past also to address these issues. This is not a new issue. This issue cropped up right from 1991 onwards itself. Fine. So we have been taking a lot of steps, a lot of measures to address this issue. Yet even in 2020, India's position has not improved. That's a critical examination. All right, critical examination of what? Critical examination of the government of India's claim of food self-sufficiency and their failure in delivery of food security. That's what critical examination you have to do. ठीक है, तो ये करना है आपको. तो स्कीम्स कोट करना है. फूड सिक्योरिटी एक्ट होने के बाद भी अभी भी इंडिया में लोग मर रहे हैं. There was an incident in the heart of Delhi in 2018. In the heart of Delhi, 3 children aged between 5 to 7 years, they died due to hunger, starvation. And this incident has taken place in the place of Burari in Delhi. There was a blot on the Indian democracy at that particular point of time itself. Blot on Indian bureaucracy at that particular point of time itself. The children are dying in this country despite the fact that our godowns are flooded with crops, flooded with grains. They are being eaten by the pest, eaten by the, of course, rats and pest, but not by our own children. That's actually the point. That's a critical examination. Fine.
So recent जो farmer bill आए थे सर अभी जो पास जिसकी वजह से पता farmers में protest चालू है.
Right.
सर उसका थोड़ा आप डिटेल्ड एनालिसिस दे सकते हैं क्या, क्योंकि हम लोगों को पता है क्या हो रहा है बट प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है कि वो एग्जैक्टली प्रोज एंड कॉन्स समझ नहीं रहा सर कि एमएसपी आ रहा है तब भी हो रहा है कुछ है.
वो वैसे भी डिस्कस करना है क्योंकि टेस्ट 7 आपने अगर नहीं लिखा है तो टेस्ट 7 में वो क्वेश्चन है. ठीक है, तो वो करना है मुझे. ठीक है, ओके. सो नाउ रीड द नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन.
What do you mean by deficit monetization? How far is it effective in reviving economy?
Now see, deficit monetization or monetized deficit, both are same in fact. All right. But the point is that what do you mean by this deficit monetization? See, deficit financing used to be a practice in India, which was exercised by the RBI on the behalf of the government of India. And in that practice of deficit financing, the RBI used to print new currencies and used to give it into the account of the government of India only to meet their daily expenses and the balances in their expenses or their income and expenses, in fact. Now, this practice was abandoned since 1997. In 1997, this practice was abandoned. And once it was abandoned in 1997, we introduced a new concept of WMA, that is called as Ways and Means Advances. Ways and Means Advances. Okay. So see, Ways and Means Advances, in this practice, the role of RBI with the government was redefined. And here the RBI used to offer the loan to the government at the rate of, at any particular interest rate, which used to be always a bank rate, in fact. So the rate of certain interest, they used to offer the loan. That's what used to be called as bank rate. Fine. Now this practice is known as WMA. Ways and Means Advances. It used to be done to mismatch the daily mismatches of the government of India. But here, RBI used to not print new currencies. No printing of new currencies. All right.
Sir,
Huh.
sir, are you writing something on the page?
It is not visible to you or what?
No, sir.
Oh, okay.
After first year, second question, we are not able to see anything, sir.
Oh, I have written a lot of things, in fact. Oh, I'm so sorry. I should have asked it.
Oh,
Okay.
right now, sir, I heard the sound of scribbling. That is why I thought of asking, sir.
Okay. I thought you must have been watching it. Okay, no issue. Let me again try to fix it up. Is that now visible?
Now it is visible, sir.
Oh, I've written a lot of things. I think I've written, see.
So share the PDF, sir.
I've written about inclusive growth, written about this food self-sufficiency. Okay, now I'll share. Fine. So coming to this issue, that is in the context of the Ways and Means Advances. So I was just explaining to all of you that now the RBI under this particular practice does not offer any new currencies. Rather, RBI gives us a loan to the government, and in the lieu of loan, the RBI charges an interest rate from the government. That is what is called as bank rate. This is how RBI is financing the government. Now, this is a practice going on in India since 1997 till today. Fine. Now, under deficit monetization or monetized deficit. So see, this monetized deficit or deficit monetization is in the context of the balance of revenue or the lack of revenue with the government to spend upon on various activities. Primarily, the government spent money for two activities. One is development and one is the maintenance of the government. Fine. So lack of revenue with the government is now being financed by the RBI, especially in the context of the lack of money available from the market in the form of taxes due to the lockdown and other, you can say, processes. So in the light of having less money in the hand of the government, the RBI has started offering money to the government. And this is actually called as deficit monetization currently. But in this deficit monetization, RBI is not printing new currencies. What RBI is doing, RBI is offering the loan to the government Fine. And in the lieu of loan, of course, government will have to pay some interest rate also to the government, or to the RBI, in fact. That is what actually is being done currently. That's the concept of deficit monetization being followed by RBI. Fine. It is all due to the mismatch between the income and the expenditure of the government in the last few, of course, months. Fine. Due to the corona and this COVID-19 lockdown impact. Fine. That is one thing. Secondly, due to demonetization also, the supply of cash or availability of cash in the market came down. Now, of course, it is also a process to remonetize the economy through the deficit monetization. So with this, of course, accessibility and availability of money or the flow of cash in the market will also increase further. So cash flow will also increase further in the market in near time. That's what actually was also done. Now, this is the basic idea about deficit monetization. So the point is, what is the impact of that? What would the impact of that? Tell me. You understood the concept? Huh?
No, just one question, sir.
Uh-huh.
Sir, in ways and means advances, the RBI was offering in same loan to the government, but at the bank rate.
At the bank rate.
Yeah. In deficit financing, deficit monetization, also they are offering loans to the government.
Correct.
But is it in exchange of the government bonds or at certain particular rate?
In both the ways, even in this particular context also, the government, of course, receives the money in the exchange of bond only. On what basis the bank rate will be fixed? On the government bonds only. All right. So without government bonds, that's actually a collateral for the RBI. RBI cannot offer any loan to anyone, not even the government. So of course, the government bonds used to be also taken by the RBI, even in the case of WMA. ठीक है, तो सेम प्रोसेस यहाँ पे भी है, तो गवर्नमेंट बॉन्ड्स के थ्रू ही देती है लोन.
तो इसका रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट सर ऐसा बैंक रेट से भी कम है या रेपो रेट पे देते हैं शॉर्ट टर्म?
नहीं, अभी तो बैंक रेट पे ही है.
So क्या exactly difference क्या है? What is the exact मतलब what is the need for deficit for monetization का introduction? Because ways and means advances ही continue हो रहा फिर ये.
Ways and means advances is the process. Deficit monetization is the concept.
अच्छा ये.
How do you exercise deficit monetization through ways and means advances? That actually is the point.
Okay.
ठीक है, ये point. ठीक है. What is the impact of that? Now you can tell me the impact also.
So it can eliminate crowding out effect because if government is not taking money from the people, so investment हो जाएगा sir, इसमें बढ़ जाएगा, investment market में बढ़ेगा.
Okay. Anything else? How far is it effective in reviving economy? So you have to simply analyze it in the context of two things. That of course, in the last few years, with the certain economic reforms taken by the government of India, it has had a mixed bag of results, especially in the context of demonetization and GST. Now, because of that, of course, the small, medium enterprises, they suffered a lot in both the cases of demonetization and GST. Because of that, the unorganized sectors, which used to be almost 93% in India, working in the small and the you can say the village level industries, of course, these industries suffered a lot. So in the light of that impact, already economy was slightly going down. Moreover, COVID-19 has added more fuel into the fire. So already Indian economy was in a deep shock because of these all major reforms done by the government, and adding the impact of COVID-19 and its lockdown has created a lot of, you can say, panic into the Indian economy. Therefore, many of the international organizations, agencies have rated Indian economy has declined or has gone back to decline to more than 23%. All right. as far as GDP's growth is concerned. So these all things came out of this. Now, in the light of this, there was a need to, of course, promote the economic activities in India. So RBI took a lot of measures, including even the deficit monetization as a measure, to, of course, promote the inflow of cash, inflow of money into the hand of the government, and the government can further spend it for various other purposes. Fine, that is one way to actually revive back the economy. Second, of course, through deficit monetization, when RBI started offering the loan, the government started even spending on various infrastructural projects in India. Various infrastructure projects which were still, you can say, holding up. Now they all have been again revived back. They all have been again launched back. Fine, that's one thing the government started doing it. Fine. Thirdly, the government also has started offering the various financial measures to help the poor and the migrant workers, like the PM Garib Kalyan Yojana. All right. So this is how the government started even offering the monetary benefits to many of the needy population of this country. So in this way, it has been used by the government in last few months. But the point is, with the deficit monetization also, it may also lead towards inflationary pressure in the economy. This has been witnessed now. Inflation has risen. Inflation has increased in India, especially the food inflation is increasing in India. So food inflation is increasing in India. It's one thing that is again another impact of the deficit monetization. Second is, absolutely the government might not be able to prudently follow the fiscal policy and its parameters under the FRBM law. All right. So of course that is another very important observation to deficit monetization. Fine. Thirdly, of course, the government might not be able to also revive the economy, because this is not a measure to revive the economy. Rather, it is a measure to bring relief into the economy. Revival needs a different set of strategy. All right. It is only in the context of bringing relief, because relief and revival should not be confused. Relief is to provide immediate, you can say, succor to the sufferers. But how to make the sufferers stand on their feet, you need a long-term project. You need a long-term, you can say, objective for that. So therefore, it might not be very effective in terms of reviving the economy. Only it would be effective in bringing some relief to some people at, let's say, some point of time. That's it. But to revive the economy, Indian government needs a long-term, medium-term objective in terms of investing on infrastructure, bringing investment, creating opportunities, jobs, employment. That is how economy would again be revived back. That's exactly the analysis. Okay. Yes. Read next question.
What is digital currency? How are they different from cryptocurrencies?
This will also be discussed tomorrow. Next question.
Land reforms in India is centered to both increase in the food production and ensuring social justice. Do you consider land reforms in India is still an unfinished agenda? What are its challenges?
See, here the point is that simple. You have to write about that land reform was having various objectives, but out of those objectives, the most important ones were to increase the food production in India by the redistribution of land among the landless farmers and the poor peasants in this country. And secondly, also to ensure social justice, because fact of the matter is that the issue of justice in India is also based upon the equal distribution of land. And since land is not equitably distributed in this country, therefore we have a huge element of huge incidence of injustice and also inequality and inequity both in this country. So in the context of this, these all observations only, land reforms become highly central to the issue of both the increase in the food production and ensuring social justice among the deprived and disadvantaged sections of India. Fine, that's one aspect which we'll explain here. Then you have to also explain, do you consider the land reforms in India still an unfinished agenda? So obviously, yes. Why obviously yes? Because you have to explain about that land reforms when it was launched, of course, right from 1950s onwards. It became the very first issue for the government as far as socio-economic reforms in India is concerned, especially after India's independence. So obviously, since then only we have been struggling. We have launched various measures for land reforms. For example, such as you can write about, for example, of course, abolition of Jamindari system in India. Similarly, fixation of land tenure in India, fixation of land rents in India. All right. Then also the introduction of new measures like cooperative farming in India, consolidation of land in India, selling of land holdings in India. So there are various examples of land reforms in this country. There's no doubt about it. So of course, these all were introduced in this country at different point of time in different regions also. However, However, it has not been able to achieve the objectives of either the food production increase tremendously in this country and even ensuring social justice among the poor or the deprived sections of India. So those things are still not achieved in this country. Still, we are having, of course, high level of inequality in this country. Even on the parameters of Gini coefficient, that measures the level of inequality in any particular part of the world. Even on Gini coefficient, India's rank is very poor. All right, it is abysmally low. That is below 30%. So there also in Gini coefficient, India says or India has been seen as an highly unequal society or unequal society. Most important, in the latest survey also, it has been observed that only 7% of Indians are actually having the resources in the command of 93% resources of this country. So these are the observations made by the international reportings, international agencies as well about India. And the core of this issue is absolutely the lack of proper distribution of land among the landless and the poor people in this country. Until the time that is not addressed in India thoroughly, India is not going to have a equitable and equal society. All right. Of course, egalitarian society is always a utopian concept. But nevertheless, what actually has been achieved in the state like Kerala in India, what has been achieved in the country like China in the world, of course, that can also be replicated in many parts of India where we have a huge number of population dependent upon the land for their sake of livelihood. In the context of this only, it is actually an unfinished agenda according to many scholars. All right. Until the time that is not addressed, it is difficult to address many of the socio-economic and issues of internal securities in India, including even Naxalism in this country. So even Naxalism can't be eradicated till the time land reform is not executed in India in true letter and spirit. All right. So that's what actually you have to analyze this answer. In the light of that only, you can also include one point about the Land Acquisition Act, the Land Acquisition Rehabilitation Act, all right, which has been introduced, LARR Act, the Land Acquisition Rehabilitation Resettlement Act 2014. Now that was introduced also because of the proper problem in the land reform in India. And there you can simply write about that there was a problem in the context of course, the land being acquired by the state in the name of development. So obviously that also led to a lot of protest and of course violent protest across India, especially the examples like Singur, Nandigram, all right, examples also in Pune. So a lot of examples actually have been there in the past. So that's what actually India has faced a problem as far as land reform is concerned. And in the context of that, there are various challenges even currently. Challenges you have to highlight, especially in the context of there's a lack of political will. That's very important challenge. Actually, there is a lack of political will, and therefore land reform has not been successful in India. So there's a lack of political will in this country, and therefore it has failed in terms of achieving its objectives. Wherever there was a political will, it has been successful in achieving its objectives. That's one thing. Secondly, land is a state subject. And most importantly, since the state subject, there has to be a proper coordination between central and state governments to achieve the land reform. And since some of the other elements have always been against the proposal of land reform. Therefore, it has not been effective on the land. Fine. That is what actually is a challenge. Thirdly, of course, you can say the schemes like the policies of various individuals also in the past of land distribution, land redistribution. Fine. Like Vinoba Bhave launched Bhutan movement. So Bhutan movement launched by Vinoba Bhave was successful only to a certain extent. But what kind of land was distributed? It was completely uncultivable land. So even in Bhutan movement, on paper it was successful, but in reality, the success was not at all there in the context of the poor farmers, landless farmers. Because what kind of land was distributed in the Bhutan movement and Gramadan movement? It was mainly the uncultivable land. All right. So that is how it also failed in achieving its objective. Fine. So this is what you have to write. Then also the challenges is that there is a lack of uniformity. Uniformity in land reform, there's a lack of uniformity in, let's say, the advantages of consolidation of land, the advantages of cooperative farming in India. So these all are the challenges to the land reforms in this country. Fine. And on this basis, one you have to write about the issue. And last but not the least, you have to write about that for the poor, for the deprived, for the let's say disadvantaged, like the tribals. In fact, land is the only resource. Land and the forest are the only resource for them. Now, definitely, in the name of development, in the name of resource exploitation, it is of course not recommended to actually throw them out from their land, which is actually the place of not only their settlement, but also a source of livelihood in this country. That's the reason why it is a challenging factor, challenging, you can say, issue, even for the state. Fine, that is the point. So on this basis, you have to write the answer. Okay? हाँ, रोहित.
सर मैंने ये भी पढ़ा था कहीं पे कि जब इंडिपेंडेंस हुआ था तो ये जो भी लैंड जो डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन हो रहा था पोस्ट लैंड रिफॉर्म्स तो सम जमींदार हैड टू बी गिवन कॉम्पेंसेटरीज आल्सो कॉम्पेंसेटरी कुछ देना पड़ रहा था ना उन लोग को तो वो सर सिर्फ मेजर लार्ज फार्मर्स ही दे पाए थे पुअर फार्मर्स दे नहीं पाए थे So basically, the land reforms introduced post independence mainly benefited the large farmers instead of the low farmers or marginal farmers. So उन लोग का जो प्रॉब्लम्स है वो और बढ़ गया था सर.
हाँ, उसमें इश्यू ये था कि देखो जब when land reforms introduced ना, then there was an issue of also the land ceiling. The people who are having a huge you can say position of land. Now, of course, on the basis of the interstate council meeting, it was decided that in every state, state-wise, there would be a law of ceiling implemented. And when they started going for a law of ceiling, the big landlords, the big farmers, the big landlords, they also started going for the Benami transactions. And because of the Benami transactions only, the land reforms simply failed into its objective. They transferred the name of the land or the ownership of land into the name of certain ghost people who are not even in existence, who may have died. Even the people who were their servants, who were there, of course, you can say that the peasants, tenants in their land. So in their name, their land names were transferred just to scuttle down the law. ठीक है, तो ये सब करके लैंड पूरा बच गया सबके पास और सरकार गवर्नमेंट वाज नॉट सो सीरियस इन टर्म्स ऑफ एग्जीक्यूटिंग इट. That's the reason why it said very clearly that lack of political will was the major reason behind its failure. Rest will come afterwards. All right. Even the law of Jamindari was very, very vague in terms of its provisions. The Jamindari Abolition Act is quite vague in terms of its provisions. All right, it does not explain clearly who is the peasant, who is the Jamindar. And because of that only, the things were actually taken in favor of these powerful Jamindari lobbies in India. That's actually the point. ठीक है?
फॉरेस्ट राइट्स एक्ट भी एक तरह का चैलेंज ही होगा ना सर इसमें.
बिल्कुल है. लैंड एक्वायर करने में वो भी बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज है. बिल्कुल.
Yes,
Now read next question. Anyone?
The biggest challenge to the Indian agriculture and industries today is poor supply chain management. In the light of statement, critically examine the supply chain resilience initiative recently proposed for India.
Right. So there are two things which have been clubbed together. One is about the syllabus that is mentioned there in your economy, and second is about the current affairs. So both of these things actually have been merged together. So first and foremost, you have to identify that what actually is the or the are the challenges in the supply chain management of both agriculture industries in India today. So supply chain management is actually includes the upstream and the you can say the downstream linkages. So when you have upstream and downstream linkages, both are actually having a problem. That actually leads to a poor supply chain management in any part of the world, including in India. As far as, let's say, agriculture is concerned, we have to understand that in agriculture there are upstream and downstream linkages problems. The if I have to talk about the downstream linkages problems, absolutely, you can see the kind of you can say cold storages, the kind of technological support that is there with the agriculture, that is actually creating a problem for Indian agriculture primarily. And because of that only, there has been a problem in Indian agriculture mainly, in fact. And similarly, in the upstream linkages also, there are lack of, you can say, food processing industries in India, and because of that, agricultural products which are highly perishable, they are not getting the proper, you can say, shape, proper form, or proper, you can say, placement in India. So therefore, India is also known for a country of not only producing the good amount of crops. In fact, India is a leading country in the production of food grains in the world. At the same time, India is equally leading country in the context of the wastage of food grains in the world. So India is equally not producing high, but also it is wasting food grains highly in the world. And that is what actually is the biggest challenge in India's supply chain management. And that simply also you can say relates to the industrial sectors of India. So even in industries, we have the both a problem of supply chain management in the context of the support of logistics to industries, support of the raw materials to industries, and as well as support to the market to the industries. So even the market are also having problem limitations in India, because market India is not very much organized. They are highly unorganized marketing system in India. All right, unlike the American economy where market is highly organized. In America, there are only two kind of markets. One is, of course, the big malls. Another one is the pop and mom shops. All right, mom and pop shops. In America, there are only two kind of markets available. One is the big malls run by Walmart, Carrefour, all right, Amazon, fine, IKEA, etc. And another one is the mom and pop shops. And these all markets are highly regulated by the government over there in America. All right. So therefore, in America, the supply chain management is highly, you can say, efficient, unlike in India. So we have a problem of not only logistics and supply of raw materials and equally transportation, but also the linking of industries to the market in India. And for that, we need a huge investment in the form of FDI to create proper market along with proper transportation to connect industries to the market in India. Fine. So these are the challenges also that is quite visible in the supply chain management in industries in India. Now, in the light of this only, Japan has recently proposed. Japan has proposed the SCRI, where Japan, Australia, US, and India. In fact, Australia has already agreed. US is going to be agreed. In fact, so Japan, Australia, and India, they all have agreed to create the supply chain resilience initiative, especially in the context of coronavirus or COVID-19, especially when they realized that China was involved in some of the other manner in terms of its spread across the globe. And the belligerent behavior of China, that is also adding more woes to the problem into the global economy. All right, especially in the region of South China Sea, in the region of the you can say the Pacific Ocean, China has become belligerent in terms of its behavior. And that's the reason why these countries have come together and trying to, of course, isolate China, because China has been the biggest supplier of not only the raw materials but also the finished goods to all these countries, right from Japan, Australia, and even in India. So of course, when they will cut off the you can say impact of Chinese into the economy, they are also going to face a problem of what raw materials, problem of even the supporting materials for both agricultural products and even in the industries in India and across the globe, in fact. So that's the reason why they want to join hands together. And in that context, a supply chain resilience initiative has been proposed where India, Australia, and Japan have already agreed. US has been taking some time to give the consent. So once US will give the consent, you can see Quad would be formed not only for defense but also for economic integrity or economic union among these all states. That actually is analysis of this particular issue. Okay. Read the next question.
Sir, we are unable to see the questions on the screen.
No, you're not able to see.
No, sir.
Okay, just a moment. Now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Sir. Actually, sir, the last question of supply chain resilience initiative. We have to critically examine how will this help in getting over the challenges of Indian agriculture.
See, you have to analyze in both the manner. First of all, what are the advantages through this particular initiative, and what are the concerns on this initiative? Fine. Even though the question is not asking, let me tell you one more thing. Even though the question is not asking you, does not mean that you don't have to write about the concerns on any particular issue. Yes. You are free to write, and you must write, in fact. After writing that, what are the advantages or what are the possibilities of this concept, you also must write about there are certain concerns or certain issues which are pertaining to this particular matter, such as like 1 or 2, 3, whatever concerns you can raise about it. That is required in every answer, in fact. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is next question is simple. I don't think that you need any explanation over here. It's a simple, you have to write about blue devolution, benefits and challenges in India. So there's nothing to discuss. I'll share the answer right now only. You will have a proper idea about it. So let's move to next question. It will save our time. I hope you know about blue devolution. It is about aquaculture and fisheries. So of course, in the context of that one, you have to write. One more thing that you have to write, which I found that in some of your answers were not there, is that on any such kind of, let's say, concept, if you have any government scheme, or rather government schemes must have been there, you must include the name of those government schemes in your answer. Like I saw some of your script where you wrote about blue devolution comprehensively, completely, but you missed out. You missed out the PM Matsya Sampada Yojana. All right, so that you should not do it. You should not actually commit a mistake, in fact. When you're writing something upon any particular concept and where the government has been quite serious and launching a lot of schemes, must include all these ideas also in your answer. ठीक है, तो ये करना है. Fine. Okay, now read the next question.
What are the forms of direct and indirect subsidies in agriculture? What concerns?
What are the forms of?
Yeah, read what anyone.
What are the forms of direct and indirect subsidies in agriculture? What concerns have been shown by WTO members on India's subsidy policy to farming?
So There are two things which you were supposed to explain nicely, but I found that on WTO issue, most of you have not been able to do justice. Okay, fine. So let us first of all discuss about forms of direct and indirect subsidies in agriculture. See, subsidies are basically the economic assistance provided by the state, given by the state to support and promote any industry or any economic activity or any individual also.
So we are not able to see the green board now. If you're writing something.
Now,
Yes,
not
sir.
yet.
Yes, yes, sir.
So now visible. Okay. So, see, what is subsidies? Subsidies is basically the balance between the government financial support in the context of economic cost of the production minus the realization of the product. All right, suppose the economic cost of production of 1 kg of urea, that is fertilizer, it is 100 rupees per kg. But the government is realizing only rupees 40 per kg for urea. So what amount of subsidies government has given on 1 kg of urea? Rupees 60 per kg. So subsidies is defined as the balance between the economic cost of production and the sales realization of the product. That is actually called as subsidies. For example, I give an example to make you understand this concept clearly. Now here I just simply told you that economic cost of production of 1 kg of urea is, let's understand, is rupees 100 per kg. And after selling this urea to the farmer, government has also realized rupees 40 per kg. Government has sold the same 1 kg of urea at subsidized rate. To whom? To the farmer. And they have received rupees 40 from the farmer for the same 1 kg of bag of urea. So finally, what was the expenditure the government has done on subsidies? It is 60 rupees per kg. That's exactly the government financial support. That's the meaning of subsidies. I hope this is clear to all of you. Fine. This is the definition of subsidies in fact. If you have to define subsidies, you have to define subsidies in this manner only. Fine. Now see, subsidies are also always of two types: direct and indirect. Now, what do you mean by direct subsidies? So, see, direct subsidy simply means the beneficiary of subsidy, are they receiving the support directly from the government? Because the government is offering the subsidies, so whether this is going into the account of the beneficiaries directly or not. Indirect means that there are certain intermediaries. There are certain intermediaries before the beneficiaries are being connected by the government or being connected by the government directly. So in this case, government is finally connecting it to the intermediaries, another offering the subsidies, benefit of subsidies to the intermediaries, and then it is going to the hand of the beneficiaries. That is indirect subsidies. All right, and the best example for you is of this is MSP, minimum support price. It is a kind of subsidies given by the government of India. Fine. So MSP is a live example for all of you as a form of direct subsidies. Whereas fertilizer subsidy is a great example of understanding the indirect subsidies. Because here the subsidies are being paid by the government not to the farmers directly, rather to the fertilizer companies, industries. So fertilizer factories or industries are receiving the benefit of subsidies from the government, and then they are selling it at the reduced cost into the market to the farmers. That is an example of direct and indirect subsidies. Fine. Now let me tell you that 90% of subsidies in India currently, in any form, leave even agriculture. Government of India offers subsidies in economic sectors, including agriculture, industries, everything. Also, the Government of India offers subsidies in the social aspect like education, health. All right, how do you get the cheapest of treatment in government hospital? Because of subsidies. How do you get the cheapest of education in the government schools? Because of subsidies. So the idea is Government of India is spending money in the form of subsidies, not only for the economic activities, but also for social activities. Even for the power supply. Even for the water, drinking water that you and me and you are actually availing. All right. So these are the examples of subsidies. Of course, we don't get the money directly into our account. The money goes into the other agencies which are authorized to create and provide these services to all of us. Fine. The other example which you can understand it clearly, that earlier when there was no PAHAL scheme, that is LPG, there was no PAHAL scheme, then the subsidies of PAHAL or the subsidies of LPG cylinder used to go to the petroleum companies. But today the government has launched a direct subsidies. And what is being done? The government is not offering subsidies to the petroleum companies now. Petroleum companies are selling the products at the market rate to all of us now. And if we are eligible beneficiaries, then we are getting the balance amount of subsidies in our account by the government. And that is the example of direct subsidies. Fine. Now, these are the examples through which you can understand this concept clearly. And I just told you, majority of subsidies in India, be it fertilizer subsidy, credit subsidy, seed subsidy, all right, power subsidy, water subsidies. Now, these all subsidies are of indirect form of subsidies. Only on fertilizer subsidies, the government of India is spending or has been spending more than rupees 75,000 crore per annum. 75,000 crore per annum. Even I'm giving you the figure of last 5 years on an average. It went up to even rupees 99,000 crore in the year 2002-03. So that is the amount of money the government of India is spending on fertilizer subsidies. Fine. Now the point is the second aspect of the question. That is actually very important for all of you. The second aspect of the question was, what concerns have been shown by the WTO members on India's subsidies policy to farming. Now, the point is that you have to understand, first of all, what is the subsidy policy of WTO. Now, see, WTO, I hope you are able to see the screen, green screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay. On WTO, we have an agreement on agriculture. All right, AOA. It came up in 1995. India was not only a founding member of WTO, but also a signatory of this particular agreement. Fine. Now, as per this agreement, every nation, including India, will have to create an environment in which there should be a free and fair competition among the countries on agricultural products. Fine, that is the principle of this AOA. India agreed, India signed it. But under this, the issue was that actually created a problem for India. It was the issue of subsidies. So see, subsidies are given by both developing and even the developed countries. To whom? To the farmers. Fine. Now, in this particular AOA, it was agreed upon that both developing and developed, both will have to stop these subsidies being offered to the farmers gradually. All right. Why gradually? Because the fact is, you cannot create a free and fair competition if the state is supporting. If a state is supporting any player in the arena of competition. So here, a state must not support even the farmers. So the farmers of America, farmers of Europe, farmers of India can compete against each other. That was the principle of AOA. Now, when it was agreed upon, India being a developing country raised this issue very you can say very clearly, that competition between two unequals can't be free and fair. The farmers of India can't be equated with the farmers of America, and so with the farmers of Europe. Indian farmers are very poor. They don't have the basic instruments with them. They don't have the basic, you can say, economic support with them. They don't even get the 2 times of meal properly, unlike what American and European farmers enjoy. So, of course, it can't be an equal competition. Hence, India needs to, or other countries in the developing list, they need to support their farmers through subsidies. All right, they need to support their farmers through subsidies. On the other hand, developed countries must stop supporting their farmers through subsidies. Because developed countries, they do not need, or other farmers of developed countries do not need the state support. But farmers of India, they do need the state support. That is what actually was the issue. Under this, they came out with a proposal of various boxes. One was amber box. Now, amber box was basically the direct measure of subsidy support. Subsidy support. And as per the amber box, every state will have to reduce their amount of subsidies reduce their amount of subsidies gradually to the extent of its elimination. To the extent of its elimination. Now that was agreed upon in the Amber Box. India also agreed upon it. Now, as per the Amber Box, India also has to reduce their subsidies. Even, of course, Europe or America, Canada, Australia, they also have to reduce their subsidies. But there was a provision of de minimis subsidies. De minimis subsidies, that is exception of Amber Box. Exception of Amber Box is de minimis subsidies. Now, as per de minimis subsidies, it allows a permissible limit of subsidies. In fact, de minimis is nothing, it is basically permissible limit of subsidies. एम्बर बॉक्स में साफ साफ कहा हुआ है कि आपको डायरेक्ट सब्सिडीज नहीं देने हैं, आपको खत्म करने हैं धीरे धीरे इसको, ठीक है। उसमें एक एक्सेप्शन जोड़ा हुआ है, उसका नाम है de minimis. De minimis क्या कहता है? It says that the permissible limit of subsidies that is allowed for whom? For both developed and developing countries. For developed and developing countries. Now, for the developed countries, they are allowed only to extend the subsidies up to 5% of the value of their total agricultural produce. 5% of the value of total agricultural produce. And for the developing country, it is 10% of the value of total agricultural produce. And this value of agricultural produce would be estimated on the basis of 1986-87 base year. 1986-87 base year would be used for calculating the value of a country's agricultural produce. And accordingly, a country can give only 5% if it falls into the developed categories like America, US, Canada, Australia, Europe. They are eligible for only 5% of subsidies, up to 5% in fact, not above that. Similarly, for India, it is up to 10%. Now, India's MSP comes under this. India's MSP comes under this. So, Indian government can't offer MSP that will cross 10% of limit. Fine. Because MSP is a direct subsidy. It's a form of direct subsidies. And as per the de minimis subsidies of Amber Box provision, India can't offer beyond 10% of the value of total agricultural produce in the form of direct subsidies like MSP. So even India will have to regulate MSP. That is compulsory because India has signed this agreement. So India needs to regulate itself in offering the MSP. There's no doubt about it. This is the international obligation on India. For example, when it was challenged by America, Canada, and to the extent of even Europe, when India or Government of India launched the Food Security Act of 2013, the WTO members, especially the developed ones, they challenged the Indian law on the WTO platform. Which law? Food Security Act. Why? Because as per the Food Security Act.
So can you repeat the last line, please?
Yes, I'm repeating. I said that the Indian government, when it came out with the Food Security Act of 2013, it was challenged by the developed countries on the WTO platform. क्यों कहा, क्यों चैलेंज किया? चैलेंज इसलिए किया कि उनका ये मानना था कि भारत का ये जो फूड सिक्योरिटी एक्ट है वो जो है डी मिनिमिस सब्सिडीज के प्रोविजन को वायलेट करेगा, एम्बर बॉक्स के प्रिंसिपल्स को वायलेट करेगा और उस वायलेशन के अगेंस्ट इंडिया पे एक लीगल कार्रवाई होनी चाहिए और इंडिया के ऊपर सैंक्शंस लगने चाहिए। यह डिमांड था अमेरिका का, यह डिमांड था कनाडा का, यह डिमांड था, वही कनाडा जो आज प्रोटेस्ट कर रहा है फार्मर्स के साथ, यह डिमांड था ऑस्ट्रेलिया का। ऑलराइट, नाउ दिस आर डिमांड ऑफ दिस ऑल कंट्रीज against India just 4 years back, 5 years back in fact. Now you see this Food Security Act, why? Because under the Food Security Act the provision was such that the government was going to offer almost more than 67% of India's population the coverage of Food Security Act, in which they will be offered the food grains at the cost of rupees 3, 2 and 1. Cost of rupees 3 for rice, 2 for wheat and rupees 1 for the millets. All right. So at this cost, the government of India was going to offer the food for all almost in this country. And that was becoming a legal right now. So they challenged it. They challenged it because according to them, India is going to definitely violate the de minimis subsidies. However, India defended it's very nicely on the WTO platform by indicating that Food Security Act is not at all being covered under the Agreement on Agriculture, because Agreement on Agriculture applies on the farmers, on the producers, not on the consumers. And India's Food Security Act is for the consumers, not for the farmers, not for the producers. So therefore, India's Food Security Act does not violate AOA. Very logical argument. All right. Then India also mentioned that the entire calculation of the 10% and 5% subsidies is misnomer. Now, what was the price prevailing in 86, 87 and what the price is prevailing in 2013, 14 is completely contrast. So, of course, you have to revise this pricing system. Fine. And thirdly, of course, India was supported by even all the developing countries, including China. All right. So even China also supported India, and China finally voted in favor of India, that it is a non-negotiable issue because it's a sovereign right of state like India and others to create certain laws to protect their citizens. So through this, India defended it, but India was under pressure. There's no doubt about it. India was under pressure, and India actually promised on the WTO platform, even in the subsequent meetings, that India will not violate the de minimis subsidies in any circumstance. And therefore, it is important for India to regulate the MSP. India can't let MSP go the way the farmers of India want. So it is essential to India for India to regulate it and to keep it under the 10% cap. That is the WTO issue. Fine.
Sir,
Huh.
what is this Nairobi package and the other peace clause was also invoked by India recently?
It was subsequent to that same particular meeting only. Peace clause was finally agreed upon by the Americans, in fact, America, Canada, and all. They allowed India to continue with 4 years of, you can say, time frame. That for 4 years, India can continue with the Food Security Act the way it has been enacted. But afterwards, India will have to come out transparently on WTO platform that whether India is fulfilling the provisions of Ember Box or not. That was the peace clause. Only for 4 years it was allowed. Then, of course, India argued in the subsequent meeting of WTO that the 4-year peace clause should be made as permanent, because India also gave a tit-for-tat treatment to Americans, especially in the context of the American wanted to have the various other laws to be passed on WTO platform, where India actually took up a very strong stand against America. All right. So that is one of the examples is Trade Facilitation Agreement, TFA. So Trade Facilitation Agreement was pushed by Americans on WTO platform, under which the ports, the seaports were allowed to pass on or to allow to approve the transportation of the international cargoes within 48 hours. India used to take more than 72 hours to approve a cargo to cross across from the Indian ports to any other part of the world. So, for example, if America has to transport the goods from via Indian Ocean, of course, let's say to Bangladesh or even to the extent of Myanmar, then Indian ports used to provide them the stay, fine, halt. So obviously, India used to take 72 hours plus in terms of giving them the green signal from crossing across from the ports. Now, as for the TFA agreement, it has to be done within 48 hours. All right. India was not agreeing upon it. India said, if you don't agree with our Food Security Act, then why shall we agree with your TFA? All right. So finally, India negotiated with America parallelly. And when India acceded to TFA, then only America started, of course, listening down its criticism against India on the Food Security Act. So in the Nairobi package, this was actually agreed upon between the two nations. Fine. That was the issue. Yeah. Can you read the next question?
Sir,
Ha.
recently, sir, there is a new replacement of ROD TEP which is passed in India, remission of duties, taxes on export products. So it is being introduced as a way to negotiate or bypass the WTO. This.
Yeah, it is way to negotiate only, in fact.
So what exactly is the advantage in that? I think some this cashback like thing is given to the farmers, no, sir, in that.
Duty drawback scheme was already there. This is duty drawback scheme basically.
Okay.
All right. So the kind of import that you do and the kind of export that you do, on the basis of that, whatever duty that you have paid on import, you will be also getting the benefit of when you export it to any other further nation. In fact, that is there basically. That duty drawback scheme is there. Okay, read the next question.
Discuss the national infrastructure pipeline and its objectives. What are the issues and challenges of infrastructure development in India?
So exactly, while discussing one issue, I explained to you that NIP, in fact, it has been launched recently only in 2019, and there's a goal of improving India's infrastructure in the next 5 years by 2025. And here the government has already allocated rupees 102 lakh crore. All right, and that's what actually is the NIP. And here I just told you that there's a proposal to raise the money from three, in fact, entities: the central government, the state government, and also from the private sectors. And from the private sector, it is around 21% that is going to be raised. 40% is going to come up from the central government, 39% for the state government, and the rest 21% is going to come from the private sectors only, because private sectors actually have not been very enthusiastic in last few years as far as investing on infrastructure projects of India is concerned. And you can understand very clearly that infrastructure investment is a long run investment. All right, it's not like that you invest today and tomorrow you get the benefit. You start earning the profit. So you'll have to wait for a long point of time, long period of time. That's the reason why the gestation period of this particular project or any such kind of project is quite long in India. And the profit could be high, but still you have to wait for maybe 10 to 20 years. So exactly in the context of that only, they were not highly motivated to actually invest a good amount of money on infrastructure in India. And top of that, there's a fundamental principle in economics, and that I just told you, which again I'm going to reiterate. See, fundamental principle is what? That your infrastructure within the economy it becomes a deciding factor for the foreign investment, in fact, especially FDI and FII both. All right. So, for example, if you can see, let's say Chinese model. Let me discuss you briefly a Chinese model. Now, what is the model of China as far as infrastructure of China has been developed? See, China model is that infrastructure of China is basically a responsibility of the Chinese Communist government. So Chinese Communist government, they have taken the entire onus of improving infrastructure in their own state. Now see, when they have already improved the infrastructure, they have rather built up the infrastructure to the world-class infrastructure. Now this world-class infrastructure itself becomes the most attractive point for all these FDI and FII to actually get attracted towards China. And China has been the beneficiary of these FII, FDI investment because of this particular improvement of infrastructure, which actually has been missing factor in case of India. Now, why in India? Because India has been believing this FDI will come and they will build up the infrastructure. Now, that was a blunder of Indian policymakers right from the beginning. Because you need to understand that if there is an FDI, suppose I give an example, let's say FDI in the form of Nokia, in the form of Apple. Now, suppose Apple wants to invest in an economy in the form of FDI. Now, how the hell and what the hell Apple is supposed to do in the terms of improving your infrastructure? Why Apple will come and construct a road to connect, let's say, Bangalore to nearby seaport area? All right, if the seaport is in Bangalore, and you have come to the Bangalore, now why Apple will construct the expressway to connect Bangalore to seaport of Bangalore? Of course, Apple has no business in doing this. Apple has only one business, to do a business in India in terms of course, producing the products at a cheaper rate. Now that is the interest of Apple. Now for that, Apple can come and Apple can create the infrastructure in your country, infrastructure till the extent of only creating, let's say, buildings and nearby roads, nearby you can say essential supplies support system. That can be done by Apple, but you can't expect Apple to construct entire ports, entire airports for you. Of course, that's a complete foolish to believe in that. Exactly, China has done excellent work in this particular part. And therefore, China has increased tremendously. China has progressed tremendously in comparison to what India is today. So that is a fundamental difference between the model of Chinese infrastructure and Indian infrastructure. Therefore, now in this context only we have to understand that it is a state responsibility to actually build up the infrastructure, and then only state can actually attract the foreign companies, the foreign investment in our economy. In this context only, the NIP has to be analyzed. Fine. So that is the concept of NIP, that is the rationale of NIP, and therefore the objectives of NIP is also in the context of the same, that we have to build up the robust infrastructure to attract the foreign investment. We have to build up the robust infrastructure to also improve our economic activities, especially the industrial and the supporting activities. So in the context of that only, the NIP has been again re-emphasized by the government. But there are issues and challenges in the infrastructure development in India, that is for sure. And what are the issues? Issues are in the factors of production: land, labor, capital, and even entrepreneurship. So land, labor, capital are the four, of course, are the land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship are the four major challenges, as well as issues, as well as issues also in India. So land acquisition is a major issue. Labor reform is a major issue. Raising capital from the market for infrastructure is another major issue. Creating a skilled labor force, trained labor force to manage this infrastructure is another major issue. And at the same time, there are challenges like financial limitation. There are challenges like the financial, of course, limitations. Then there are also challenges like the environmental laws, the labor laws. So we have to also reform. Yes, Devendra, you're right. So land, labor, liquidity law. So these all are challenges, in fact. All right. So these challenges we'll have to highlight here in our answer. And last but not the least, The very basic challenge for Indian economy is that Indian economy is a poor capital economy. It is a poor capital economy, and of course, Lewis Arthur was right in indicating that it is a cyclic problem for any economy. Same was also told by John Maynard Keynes. So Keynes also said the same thing. It's a cyclic problem for Indian economy. India is poor because it's poor. No, India is poor because it's poor because the fact of the matter is India does not have capital to invest back into the infrastructure. And till the time you are not having capital to invest back into infrastructure, you cannot be able to generate capital. And to generate capital, you need capital. Because money begets money, that's a fundamental principle in economics. So since money begets money and you don't have money, how would you beget money? So this cyclic problem, India has a cyclic structural limitations. That's actually the biggest limitation for Indian economy even currently, and exactly the same applies even to the sector of infrastructure. Fine. So you need to understand even by the principle of Okun's law. There's a principle of Okun's law. Okun's law says that if you reduce 1% of your unemployment rate, you increase 3%, it is 3 times your GDP growth. And to decrease 1% of your unemployment rate, you will have to invest at least 3% of your GDP on infrastructure. So idea is these three concepts are very highly interlinked: infrastructure, employment, and GDP growth. If you have to create infrastructure, you will have to offer jobs, you have to create employment opportunities. And for that, of course, you will have to invest money. You have to pay them the salaries and other monetary support. So till the time that is not done, infrastructure is not going to be improved. And if the infrastructure is not going to be improved, your GDP is not going to be improved. That is a link. That's actually the structural limitation. Okay. Okay, now read the next one.
What is tax forbearance?
Yes.
How is it assisting in the revival of economy under the impact of COVID-19?
Correct. Tax forbearance is nothing. It is basically delaying of the tax collection, delaying of the collection of the loan amount. It is simply a moratorium imposed upon the collection of loan and other, you can say, liabilities from the beneficiaries, in fact. So tax forbearance as a policy has been launched by both the government under the fiscal policy and even by the RBI under the monetary policy. So you have to write about both these roles. Talking about the RBI's monetary policy first. See, under RBI's monetary policy, it has followed a policy of tax forbearance, where it has asked or rather directed the banks in India to offer a moratorium on charging interest rate on the loans taken in the past by the loanees, so that they should get the lease life to bounce back, because under the impact of the lockdown, the economy was almost on a standstill. There was no any economic activity going on. So obviously, since the economic activity is not going on, it is futile to expect that the tax, of course, SSAs would be able to pay the tax, would be able to pay the money back to the bank. All right. So obviously, in the context of that only, the loans that was offered by the banks, the bank must offer them the interest, you can say, a moratorium. Fine. That was a aspect of the monetary policy which was introduced by the RBI during the time of the lockdown. Similarly, the government of India, through the fiscal policy, also launched the policy of tax forbearance. And in the fiscal policy, all those tax liabilities like income tax, corporate tax, all right, then even the GST, even these taxes were also given some sort of, you can say, freedom of paying the tax, freedom of exemption of paying the tax as well to many of the SSs. So through this, the government of India, along with the RBI, both have played a role under their fiscal and monetary policy to provide the tax forbearance benefit to the individuals, to the companies, to the corporates, and also to the trust and etc. That was the policy of tax forbearance. Now the point is, how is it assisting in the revival of economy under the impact of COVID-19? So see, it had assisted only in terms of providing a relief. Again, the same logic you have to apply here. It has provided relief to a short period of time to the beneficiaries, because in August 2020, when the lockdown was almost lifted for many parts of the states, many part of the country, RBI had announced that from 1st September 2020, this tax forbearance policy will not be applied. All right. So by this logic, you can understand the benefit of tax forbearance was only for 3 to 4 months, in which the lockdown was completely prevailed. Therefore, this only provided some sort of relief to many of the, of course, loanees at that particular point of time. However, after that, they had to pay their interest, their loan back to the bank. That what actually was announcement. But the point is that we have to understand is that it was only a relief measure. In that relief measure, people expecting people to earn money and to pay back the interest and loan immediately was again a highly, you can say, a high expectation on the RBI's front. So therefore, that actually did not play a very fundamental role in changing the status of the loanees and the people who took the loan from the banks at that particular point of time. Again, they suffered. Again, they felt the brunt of the change in the policy of RBI on tax forbearance. Similarly, this fiscal policy, the state government has also offered. So the central government has also offered certain benefits to the individuals for a long period of time. For example, ITR. Now, the ITR is one of these measures to actually provide relief to many of the, let's say, the beneficiaries. Government has extended the filing of ITR to the companies till December end. Sorry, for the individuals to December end, and for the companies till January 2021. So this is how the to the fiscal policy, still the Ministry of Finance is trying to assist the many of the sectors of the economy to revive back. All right, but this tax forbearance cannot, or rather would not be very effective in the revival of economy. Rather, it will be only effective in the providing relief to the many people in the country. That's what actually you have to write. How is it assisting? You have to write in this manner, and you have to also write there are certain limitations to tax forbearance in the context of revival. Revival needs investment. Revival needs employment generation. Revival needs infrastructure creation. So if these three things are not improved, revival of economy is not going to attain, will not going to be achieved immediately in India. That is how you have to write your answer. Okay. Now read next question.
Discuss the concept of public-private partnership in infrastructure. How is it different from privatization? How the government in India has been attracting the private investors in infrastructure?
Right. Now see, concept of public-private partnership is simple. It was there since 2005-6 only. In 2005, the government of India had announced to constitute the PPP appraisal committee, and as per the PPP appraisal committee, the PPI in India was launched. Triple PI in India was launched. However, this particular term that is called public-private partnership has been coined by the World Bank. So World Bank has coined this term, that is PPP, PPPI in fact. So the term became quite popular since then only. And the government of India has launched this particular concept to improvise upon infrastructure in India. As per this particular concept, the best of both, that is public and the private sectors, both have to be taken together in terms of delivering the public services for the welfare of public at large. Therefore, the right term to use here would be always public, private, and people's partnership. Because at the end of the day, this partnership is actually for delivering the goods, delivering the benefits for the people at large. Fine. And here, private sector are known to be efficient in the context of proper management, technological know-how, their expertise, their experience, and their exposure to the international market. So because of that, private sectors have been, or rather was supposed to be attracted by the government in terms of construction of infrastructure in this country. On the other hand, public sector are known for, of course, providing certain support to the private sectors like land acquisition, support of capital, support of law and order, all right, and support of even the public's or people's participation at times. So because of these factors, private sectors were also attracted towards working towards the public sector in the PPP model. Fine. So both of them were having benefit. Public sector were having benefit to work with the private sector, and as private sector were also having benefit to work with the public sector, like all these factors. And the most important factor for private sector to work with the public sector is they will gain the credibility, goodwill in the market. Now today, if you have, let's say, goodwill in the market of any private sector, it is primarily those private sectors which have been working hand in hand with the public sector. For example, it's a Tata. All right. Now, why Tata enjoys a goodwill? Because of this factor. Same logic goes with the L&T, Larsen and Toubro. Why L&T enjoys a goodwill? Because of this factor only. So idea is, if a private sector gets a chance to work with the public sector, they also want to do it because they will earn goodwill in the market and they will gain more and more experience to work closer with the government. All right. That is how the concept of public-private partnership functions. It functions on the premise of a contract. A contract is signed between the two, that is public and private, of course, sectors, to deliver on the issues of infrastructure for the welfare of people at large. That is how PPP model is understood to be. Okay. Now, how is it different from privatization? See, privatization is basically a process of denationalization, in fact. When you start selling out the public sectors or the public resources into the hand of private sectors completely, when a private sector gets the control of the ownership and the management over the public sector, then it is called as privatization. And in principle, in terms of economy, if a private sector gets more than the majority of shares in any public sector, that is above 50%, then that process is known as privatization. In other words, the control and the management of those enterprises go into the hand of private sector. So it is different from PPP in the context of that PPP does not offer the right of ownership into the hand of private sector. PPP does not offer the right of ownership into the hand of the private sector, unlike in privatization. Second, under PPP, both government and the private sectors are equally responsible for achieving the objective of the partnership. Whereas in privatization, the responsibility and accountability completely goes into the hand of the private sector only. All right. In PPP, government supports the private sector even through financial measures like VGA, viability gap funding, VGF, in fact, viability gap funding, VGF. So the government offers the financial support to private sectors like VGF, and even in other models, like today's the model is also quite popular of HAM, hybrid annuity model. All right, where of course 60-40 ratio applies, where the government also raises 60% of revenue for the private sector. So this is how the government also has a responsibility in the PPP model. Fourthly, that under PPP model, the government has to deliver the best of the services to the people at an affordable cost, which is not applied in the case of privatization. In privatization, private sectors or owners are free to charge any money from its consumers. Whereas in PPP, still the user fee charges are controlled. All right. So that is what you have to write here. So this is how you have to write about the differences. Fine. Then how the government in India attracting private investors in infrastructure. So of course you have to write about certain models. There are various models of PPP through which the private sectors are being attracted by the government, like BOT, BOOT model, then turnkey projects, then recent one that is the of course the HAM, that is hybrid annuity model, then Swiss models. Swiss model is also one of the ways to attract private sectors to invest in infrastructure, which has been adopted by Maharashtra government tremendously. In fact, Maharashtra and Karnataka are the biggest beneficiary of Swiss model of PPP, in which they go for the highest bidders. They are awarded the project. That is the principle of Swiss model of offering the PPP. However, there are certain concerns also there, but still the government of India has been quite skeptical on using it at national level. All right. So these are models through which you are also trying to attract the private investors to invest in infrastructure. Fine. So models को लिखना था आपको. Fine. And answer में सारा detail में लिखा होगा. Then read the next one.
तो ये सिंगापुर मॉडल भी इसमें एलिजिबल होगा ना?
लिख सकते हैं, क्यों नहीं? वो भी मॉडल अट्रैक्ट करता है इन्वेस्टर्स. ठीक है. तो आपको जितने पॉइंट्स उसमें आ सकते हैं आप लिख सकते हैं. मतलब आपको ये जस्टिफाई करना है कि हाउ डज इट अट्रैक्ट द प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट्स इन इंडिया. ठीक है.
और इसको मॉडल्स को डिटेल में एक्सप्लेन करना नहीं है सर, खाली टच करते हुए जाना.
हाँ, बस एक एक लाइन लिखते जाना है कि इसमें कैसे प्राइवेट सेक्टर को अट्रैक्ट करना है. दैट्स सफिशिएंट.
ओके सर. What is inflation targeting? How does it help in the growth of the economy? Assess the role of RBI.
Right. So see, inflation targeting as a concept has been adopted in India since 2016. However, India was the first country in the world to actually raise this issue of inflation targeting in 1986-87 itself. But somehow the government of India was not serious about inflation targeting, and therefore New Zealand became the first country in the world to adopt inflation targeting as a part of their monetary policy. India, only on the basis of the Urjit Patel Committee's recommendations, finally adopted inflation targeting in 2016. And under inflation targeting, the concept is that if inflation is targeted between 2 to 6%, then the growth of economy is optimally achieved. So, in other words, in other words, 4 plus minus 2% of inflation targeting is advisable, and the RBI was given this responsibility of achieving the target of inflation between 2 to 6%. Now the point is, how does it help in the growth of economy? See, inflation per se is not at all a negative concept. Inflation, when it goes beyond your control, then it becomes a problem for your economy. Every economy needs inflation because inflation denotes demand. And if there's a demand, there will be a production. So it is always advisable to have some of the other level of demand in the economy so that the entire factors of production are mobilized to produce more. And when you produce more, it leads to, or rather it generates, not only to produce more, it generates employment opportunities, but it finally also leads to the growth in your GDP. So inflation per se is also associated with the growth of your GDP, but it has to be targeted. So in the context of that only, you have to explain this idea that how does it help in the growth of the economy. Inflation creates demand. For demand, it creates a pressure on production, and when it creates a pressure on production tries to mobilize the resources, includes land, labor, capital, etc. And when it mobilizes labor, it also creates employment opportunities in the economy. Therefore, when we go by this logic, we finally see there is also a GDP growth in the economy. And Phillips curve is the perfect principle to analyze this issue. Now, what is Phillips curve? Phillips curve is the relationship between unemployment and the growth in the economy. Unemployment and the inflation in
Please
the
show
economy.
the green board, sir. We are not able to see. Green screen, sir.
Is it visible now?
Yes, sir.
So I was talking about Phillips curve. It is basically a perfect indicator to understand about the unemployment and inflation in the economy. How? Now see, this particular curve indicates that inflation and unemployment are inversely proportional to each other. In fact, how? See, when your unemployment rate, in fact, decreases, of course, your GDP increases. And how it decreases? It decreases because of rise in inflation. So if there is inflation in the economy, it creates demand. All right, it creates demand, and once create demand, you go for production. And for production, you need to hire laborers. When you hire laborers, you create employment opportunities, or rather, it goes into the understanding of the unemployment rate goes down. Unemployment rate goes down. So the idea is, if inflation is rising or rather it's high, then unemployment rate will be low. All right. Unemployment rate will be low. It will create employment in your economy. That's what actually Phillips curve says. Fine, this principle is applied especially in the UK first successfully, in England first successfully. However, in case of India, it has not been highly successful. Nevertheless, the idea is that even in this particular context of inflation targeting, if inflation is targeted in India between 4 to 6%, it has been observed in India that Indian economy will give a lot of employment opportunities, and finally it will lead to even the growth of GDP. Now that is the premise on which we have been arguing in favor of. Even Urjit Patel committee argued in favor of inflation targeting. Fine. So this is how it will help in the growth of the economy. Now the point is, assess the role of RBI on this. Now see, assessment means that you have to talk about the positives and negatives both in terms of assessment. So here RBI's role increased tremendously because under the RBI Act 1934, there was an amendment done in 2016. And as per the amendment, the Monetary Policy Committee was constituted to monitor the performance of RBI on the issue of inflation targeting. As per that amendment, not only MPC was created, rather even the RBI governor was held accountable. RBI governor was said to remain accountable to the Parliament of India if RBI does not or has not been able to contain or control inflation under 6% range. So suppose currently food inflation is almost 7.8%. It was 8.3% just a couple of weeks back. So here RBI has failed. So by the RBI Amended Act 1934, now the governor is definitely accountable to the floor of the parliament, and probably that's the reason why the winter session has not been called. If the winter session would have been called, then any of the member of opposition, or that is the MP, would have raised this issue on the floor of the parliament, and the speaker was supposed to call the RBI governor inside the parliament. Because here RBI governor has failed. Now that is the assessment. So here idea is that of course it was introduced in the context of giving RBI a single target under the monetary policy, and that was inflation targeting. Yet in 2020, just after the performance of last 3.5 years of inflation targeting, RBI has failed. So that's what actually RBI is now accountable on the issue of inflation targeting, and how RBI has failed on containing inflation under 6%, and why. That's an issue. ठीक है, तो ये इसका क्रक्स है, इस क्वेश्चन के आंसर का क्रक्स है. ठीक है. So let's go to the last couple of questions. So let us conclude it. Read the question.
How FDI is understood to be more reliable and stable foreign investment. Why India is attracting FDI at a time when global inflows remain flat?
Yes, right. See, first of all, FDI and FII differences, I hope that most of you are aware of. Still, I would just highlight a few of the observations. That FDI is understood to be more reliable and stable because it comes into a direct form. It creates infrastructure, it translates into a real asset, into any economy. Therefore, it becomes reliable and as well as stable foreign investment, unlike the FII. Because FII comes into the form of shares, primarily in the share market, through the share market in fact. And since it comes into the form of share to the share market, it is always easy to withdraw. It is always easy to call back the investment from the share market after selling the shares. Therefore, FII is understood to be a hot money. But at the same time, FDI can also be in share. It does not mean that FDI can't be in share. FDI, yes, FDI can also be in share, but of course it has to be above 10% of the total shares in the company. So that is also FDI, and it was clarified by Arvind Mayaram committee. Fine. So this is how we differentiate between FDI and FII particularly. The point is why India is attracting FDI at this time. It is all because of the global factors. It is all because of global factors, especially like the US-China conflict, the US-China trade war going on. And because of that particular factor, of course, the companies, the FDIs, because FDI simply denotes what? It denotes MNCs, multinational companies. So since the US has already openly, you can say, called for the rerouting of FDI, the rerouting of investment from China to India and other Southeast Asian countries. So in the context of that only, India has also been able to attract many of the FDIs. That is one factor which is attracting. Second factor is also India's own policy. The ease of doing business index. The ease of doing business index is already indicative of that India has brought a lot of reforms, a lot of changes with the sheer willpower of its politicians, in fact. So political will has been very high in India, and that is quite visible among also the foreign investors. And because of that reforms only, they have also been attracted towards investing in India, because India's parameters are almost parallel or equal to the parameters of China, especially in the context of either infrastructure or the demand factor, and also the skilled labor force, the way it is there in China. Also, similarly, it is also available to a large extent in India. Fine. So this is how these are the factors on which FDI is still being attracted in India, and that's the reason perhaps why India's foreign exchange reserves is also quite high at this particular moment. All right, it is high due to not only the attraction of FDI into India, but also the less expenditure of India on import these days. So this is how you can say the factors which are playing a role in the attracting FDI is both external and internal. You have to write in this context that there are external factors in attracting FDI at this time, and there are also internal factors which are attracting FDI at this time. So external factors में क्या क्या है वो बताना है, internal factors में क्या क्या वो बताना है. इस स्ट्रक्चर में ही इस आंसर को लिखना था. ठीक है? हाँ.
सर सॉफ्ट पावर भी एक ये होगा ना अट्रैक्शन करने के लिए.
हाँ, why not?
We can also write soft power.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल सॉफ्ट पावर भी. अभी this was a statement also came from the defense minister just a couple of days back. All right, so you must include also that India has also been able to attract due to its soft power strategy. All right, India is also having a good presence of Indian diaspora. All right, Indian diaspora's presence in America, in Europe, even in Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf nations. All right, these are very important factors in terms of attracting FDI. तो वो भी लिखना है बिल्कुल.
सर वो जो आपने इंडियन पॉलिसी बोला था, इंडियाज ओन पॉलिसी में, तो इसमें जैसा मेजर वन ऑफ द मेजर पॉलिसीज कैन बी सेड एज द रिडक्शन ऑफ कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स.
हाँ, व्हाई नॉट. सो इंटरनल फैक्टर्स में वो भी लिखना है आपको कि कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स रिडक्शन भी दैट्स आल्सो इंपॉर्टेंट. ठीक है, तो सारा फैक्टर्स है. ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस इंडेक्स में वो सब इंक्लूडेड है. इनफैक्ट टैक्स रिफॉर्म में वो पार्ट है, एक इंडिकेटर है ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस इंडेक्स का. ठीक है
सर, वो रिपीटेटिव नहीं हो जाएगा ना, बिकॉज व्हाट आई हैव रिटन इन माय आंसर इज, मैंने लिखा है कि इंडियाज इंटरनल पॉलिसीज, एंड उसके बाद एक कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स का भी एक अलग पॉइंट लिखा है मैंने. So is this called a repetitive?
नहीं, ठीक है. Corporate tax has to be highlighted because anyhow you are trying to explain about the FDI's entry into India. The FDI simply means the corporates only, the MNCs only. So of course you can highlight it separately. There's no problem with that. All right, the last one is the PMFBY 2.0 has drastically transformed the farm insurance from compulsory to voluntary and more towards getting awareness discussed. Now, see, this was actually a problem of the PMFBY that was launched in 2016, expecting that the farm insurance sector would drastically change. But since it was compulsory for the lonely farmers and for the others also, that is the reason why what used to happen, the money used to get deducted from the bank account of the lonely farmers and used to be get paid directly to the account of the insurance companies. there have been many instances in the last 4-5 years in which it was realized that farmers were not even aware of that they are having the access of any insurance facilities, yet the money was being deducted from their account. Since there was lack of awareness also, that is the reason why the private insurance companies were getting huge benefit out of this. So indirectly, there has been a sort of, you can say, I would say, a frustration among the farmers building up. All right, and because of that money, the government realized it at the right time and finally announced the 2.0 PMFBY, under which it has been made now voluntary. It is not compulsory now. Those who want to actually avail the benefit of the insurance, they can avail it. And secondly, of course, it is now focusing upon awareness creation, also one of the responsibilities upon the private insurance companies now, because then only the private companies would be able to sell their insurance coverage. Otherwise, मिलेगा नहीं ग्राहक तो बेचेंगे किसको? So that's how the government has tried to drastically reform the PMFBY 2.0 in 2020. That's what you have to write about it. ठीक है, तो ये मेजर इशू है. बाकी एक्सप्लेनेशन पूरा दिया हुआ है आंसर में, जो मैं भी आपको व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप पे शेयर करने ही जा रहा हूँ थोड़ी देर में. ठीक है. So हाँ, ask me.
सर ये जो जो कंपलसरी को वॉलंटरी किया हुआ है, इससे तो सर मतलब बैंक को भी एक लॉस पड़ सकता है ना इन फ्यूचर. ये भी एक उसका नेगेटिव एस्पेक्ट होगा ना सर इसका.
बैंक को भी लॉस होगा, बिल्कुल होगा.
तो ये भी एक वे पॉइंट लिख सकते हैं ना सर इसमें हम लोग.
लिख सकते हैं, बट द पॉइंट इज कि PMFBY was not meant for the bank. It was meant for the farmers. So whether the farmers are getting the benefit or not, that is more important for us. So if they are not getting the benefit, so whosoever is incurring a loss hardly matters with this scheme. Because this scheme was primarily focused only upon the farmers' welfare. ठीक है, तो ये है बेसिक आइडिया. फाइन.
ठीक है.
हाँ, सो ठीक है. हाँ
सर, ये अपर लिमिट ऑन सब्सिडी को जो हटा दिया गया था, तो वो क्रिटिसिज्म होगा या सर ये इसका एक तो होगा सर, क्रॉस होगा?
तो वो तो क्रिटिसिज्म ही होगा ना. क्रिटिसिज्म ही होगा, क्योंकि सब्सिडीज जो पहले दे रही थी सरकार, ठीक है, अब उस पर लिमिट हटा रही है. ठीक है, तो वो तो क्रिटिसिज्म ही होगा. किसी को कुछ मिलेगा, किसी को कुछ मिलेगा. वहां पे भी अब सिलेक्टिव हो जाएगा सब्सिडीज का बेनिफिट.
सर ये अपर लिमिट के हटाने का एक रीजन था कि गवर्नमेंट ये रीजन बता रही है कि प्राइवेट सेक्टर का पार्टिसिपेशन, कि जनरली क्या है कि हम लोग अगर बहुत ज्यादा सब्सिडी दे रहे हैं तो प्राइवेट सेक्टर को उतना अपने आप को इन्वॉल्व नहीं कर रहा उसमें.
एक्चुअली योर
अकाउंटेबिलिटी नहीं है उतनी.
हाँ, अकाउंटेबिलिटी भी नहीं है उनके प्राइवेट सेक्टर्स की. बिल्कुल ठीक है. So then I am concluding today's discussion, and tomorrow again we'll meet. I am just sharing with all of you the answer, the key answer of this all questions with all of you. Tomorrow we'll be having the discussion with Chiran sir. So we'll be discussing about the science and tech questions completely of both 6 and 7. And then he'll also discuss some more tips how to handle science and tech and environment questions there in the meeting. So he will come here at 7 o'clock in the evening. ठीक है, तो 7 बजे से हम शुरू करेंगे. ठीक है, उसके बाद if time will allow, then I'll also discuss about some of the questions of test 7. तो कल हम लोग कल परसों तक test 7 खत्म करेंगे discussion. And then on Tuesday I will share with all of you the question of ethics for 8, and then again next day only 9 tests of ethics. ठीक है, next Saturday Sunday को we'll be conducting our model test completely. ठीक है, हाँ, तो वो तैयार रखना है, दिमाग में रखना है आपको. ठीक है. So I have received a couple of your answers of test 7. So probably by tonight I will check all those test 7 papers and send it to you. 6 वाला जो आपने नहीं लिखा वो मुझे भेज दीजिए आज, तो मैं 7 चेक करने के बाद मैं 6 करके फिर आपको भेज दूंगा. ठीक है ना. ठीक है, then again I'll see you. Okay, then I'm ending up this meeting. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, bye. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you to all of you. Thank you to all of you.